Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, Parallel Deku. Back with another fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku Found Love Before Becoming a Hero. Now before starting, please give this video a like. And subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. At 4 years old, the narrator nodded when their mother asked if all their things were unpacked. Their parents had been carrying boxes of belongings into the new 2-story house next to an apartment complex in Mizudafu. They had lived in Shibuya, Tokyo, but their father, a pro hero, had found work with an agency in Mizudafu and their mother had found a job there too, so the family had to move. They had said goodbye to the neighbors who were the same age and to those kind parents who had looked after them. The child did not know what life in Mizudafu would be like, but hoped to meet people as friendly as those they had left behind. The child answered yes in a high-pitched voice. Their mother smiled and placed a kiss on the child's forehead while their father ruffled the child's hair. Their mother praised them and told them they had done very well. My dad suggested going to the park, saying he had heard there were kids my age playing there. I asked how he knew, and he explained that my mother knew someone who lived nearby and had shown her around. I looked over at the apartment complex next door and noticed it had more than 3 floors. My mother arrived and mentioned that the woman from the complex had a son about my age. My mother thought we would get along well. My eyes sparkled and excitement built. I told them I would not feel left out and that we should go to the park after. My mother giggled and my dad nodded as they finished packing our belongings. Just as I was about to go back upstairs to get ready, I saw a boy at the apartment complex my dad had mentioned, but he disappeared after a moment. The last thing I remembered about him was his hair, which was green and black. We arrived at the park and I cheered. My mother said it was nice to have a picnic in good weather and began preparing the basket, then asked if I was hungry. I shook my head and asked if I could go to the playground, pointing to the empty swings and slides. My mother agreed and hugged me, reminding me to be careful. I clutched my All Might plushie with excitement. All Might was my favorite hero, and my dad had told me great stories about him when he tucked me into bed. My dad smiled and said to call if anything happened since they would be nearby. I ran to the playground. The jungle gym looked like a perfect place to pretend to be a pro hero like my dad. I lost my footing on a sturdy part at the base of the structure and fell to the ground, startled and hurting a little. I groaned and felt tears coming. A boy about my age with black and green hair and green eyes hurried over and reached out to help me. I recognized him as the boy from the apartment. He pulled me up and immediately looked concerned, saying I was hurt. I noticed a small cut on my right knee. He quickly took a bandage from his pocket and placed it on the scrape with a gentle, reassuring smile, then asked if I felt better. I nodded and smiled with relief, thanking him and bowing politely. He giggled shyly, and I noticed his All Might shirt. He pointed out that I had a plushie of All Might, and we both reacted with excitement. I explained that my parents and I had searched a long time to find that particular plush because it was always sold out. He admitted he had not gotten one yet and brightened at the idea. I introduced myself as YNLN. He blushed slightly but smiled and introduced himself as Midoriya Izuku, expressing hope that we would become friends. We exchanged innocent smiles, and an easy, beautiful friendship began. Years passed, and Midoriya and I built a strong, pure bond that started the day I moved from Shibuya and met him at the playground. We got to know each other quickly and, by coincidence, attended the same school since we lived in the same city. Midoriya's mother, Inko Midoriya, turned out to be an acquaintance of my mother, and our parents got along well. Midoriya's father was often away working abroad, according to his mother. Back in the present, Midoriya waved at me with a tired smile as he ran over. I greeted him by name. He stopped in front of me, panting, and asked nervously if he was late. I reassured him that he was not and that the school bell had not rung yet. He sighed in relief and laughed, commenting that it was a good thing he was used to running. YN urged her friends to hurry as they went inside the middle school where Midoriya and Kachin had attended. A male classmate mocked Midoriya by calling him quirkless. YN remembered feeling sad when Midoriya had told her in elementary school that he did not have a quirk and that he still wanted to be a hero like All Might. She told the boys to leave him alone and glared at them. The boys flinched at her annoyed expression and then retreated into their own conversation. YN sighed and sat down beside Midoriya. They were seatmates by coincidence. Midoriya thanked YN shyly and offered a small smile. YN told him not to mention it and to just ignore what those boys said. He nodded and his shy smile made her smile in return. YN thought that even without a quirk, Midoriya was kind, passionate, and dedicated. She also found his shy side endearing. She took out her notebook as Midoriya brightened and announced that he had updated his hero notebook. When YN asked to see it, Midoriya opened the notebook and flipped through his recent notes, pointing out entries and explaining what he had written. He spoke with pure happiness and even made little gestures to show how the hero's moves worked. YN listened, feeling her affection for him deepen as she remembered their childhood and how meeting him had given her a wonderful friend who truly cared. Midoriya continued explaining with a huge smile, and YN's thoughts drifted until he noticed her staring and asked if she was all right. YN shook her head to clear her mind, apologized to Midoriya, and laughed it off. Midoriya looked relieved and asked again if she was sure. YN nodded and said she had just been thinking about something. Later, YN stopped doing homework that was supposed to be for Friday when her phone started ringing. Her friend from class was calling. YN answered and her friend asked if she could talk about something in person because the boy they were talking about was nearby. YN agreed and they arranged to meet. Her friend explained that she had told others she would be out for a bit and that Daiki would take charge. When they met, YN gave her friend some basic love advice about the girl's crush. Her friend thanked her profusely and insisted on treating YN as a token of appreciation. They went to a cafe that sold frappuccinos. After returning from the cashier with their drinks, YN accepted the treat and they left the cafe. As they walked, YN sipped her strawberry frappuccino. Her friend suddenly giggled and, with sparkling eyes, mentioned that she had noticed YN looking at Midoriya during lunch. She teased that YN and Midoriya looked cute together and that she could see the chemistry between them. YN blushed and covered her face as her friend continued to tease and show her support. YN asked shyly if she was that obvious. Her friend giggled and patted her back, pleased to have been right and teasing that only someone very observant would notice. YN pouted and sighed, then felt her phone vibrate. She looked at the caller ID and blushed when she saw Midoriya's name. She wanted to answer but her friend was still there, so she thanked her for the treat and asked her to go home. Her friend was surprised at the suddenness, but YN explained that her friend had a project to finish. Before leaving, the friend teased that she should tell stories about how things went once YN and Midoriya got together. YN was speechless and flustered. Her friend left and she answered the call. Midoriya asked where she was. YN replied that she was at a cafe near a market bazaar and that a friend had treated her. Midoriya suggested meeting at her place to look at history notes, and she agreed, still a little flustered. When she returned home, Midoriya was already standing outside. She called to him and he waved with his usual warm smile. Seeing him made her smile back. She apologized for the delay and asked how long he had been waiting. Midoriya reassured her that she had not been long and that he did not mind waiting since they were neighbors. She thanked him for being considerate. He laughed and scratched the back of his neck. She asked why he had been standing there instead of knocking. He said he had knocked but nobody answered. Her eyes widened and she quickly opened the door with her spare key, inviting him in and telling him to make himself at home. He hesitated, asking if it was really okay. She laughed and reminded him he had been coming over since they were kids. Playfully, she used her telekinesis quirk to levitate him toward the living room so he floated in as if like a ghost. Midoriya laughed, noting she had not done that in a while. She said she was in a good mood and then deactivated her quirk once he was seated on the couch. He thanked her politely and asked why her parents were not home. She explained that her father had hero duty and her mother had gone out to buy groceries, leaving a note in the kitchen. After he nodded, YN went upstairs to fetch her notes. She sat beside him on the couch and handed over the history notes for him to photograph. Midoriya's expression brightened as he looked through them and he complimented her neat handwriting, thanking her warmly for sharing. The compliment and his smile made her heart race and her cheeks flush. She stammered a shy response and pretended to reach for a pillow on the couch, hugging it tightly to steady herself. When their eyes met, Midoriya noticed she was blushing and asked if she was all right, sounding concerned. She laughed nervously and assured him she was fine. He still looked worried and mentioned his concern that she might be unwell. She reassured him once more and, wanting to calm down, offered to make some tea. She stood up and headed to the kitchen to prepare something warm while Midoriya waited on the couch. I can make it, I thought, forcing my breath into a steady rhythm as I ran. After 2 years of hard work, I had finally been accepted into UA High for my high school life. The entrance exam had been massive and worth the effort. As soon as the results came, my parents were overjoyed and proud of me, especially my father, who told me he was proud and reminded me that my journey to become a pro hero was only beginning and that I should keep moving forward at a steady pace. Remembering their encouragement made me smile. What surprised me was that Midoriya had also gotten into carrying the quirk he had received from All Might. I had learned that by accidentally overhearing their conversation at the beach when I had run after my dog who slipped its leash. Both Midoriya and All Might had been too shocked to come up with an excuse, so they explained and asked me to keep it to myself. I agreed immediately for their sake, especially All Might's. A week after my first day, school life was starting to settle in. Midoriya and I were classmates again, along with our other childhood friend who had also been in our class since elementary and junior high, Boku. Hearing his name always had a way of making my heart race. That morning I sprinted for the train as it was about to reach the next station. I managed to leap aboard just before the doors closed, and a wave of relief washed over me when I realized how crowded it was. As I shifted to steady myself, I recognized someone dozing beside me while holding the overhead rail. Izuku Midoriya. I called to him, and he woke with a start. Midoriya reacted with a flustered bow and a stammered greeting, his cheeks flushing bright red. I asked if he had slept late and teased him gently. He admitted, nervously, that he had been studying too late. His adorable embarrassment made me laugh quietly. Suddenly a push from the crowd sent a person into me, and I found myself leaning against Midoriya completely. He immediately apologized in a panicked rush, covering his face and insisting that it was fine, explaining that the crowd left them no choice. The red stain in his cheeks deepened as nearby passengers glanced over. I reassured him that it was okay, and he answered gratefully, still jittery. Training had been going well. In the practice area, I managed to knock down another flying dummy with my telekinesis quirk, though I realized I needed to concentrate more to make my attacks effective against tougher opponents like Boku. My phone rang abruptly and I fumbled to answer it. The voice on the line was Midoriya's. He sounded hesitant as he asked if I was busy. I told him I was finishing my training and asked what he had in mind. Midoriya, nervous but hopeful, suggested we hang out at the ice cream parlor we used to visit as kids. His suggestion made me smile, and I agreed without hesitation. He responded with excited relief and arranged to meet me there. A short time later I arrived and found Midoriya already waiting outside, smiling as brightly as the morning sun. I called his name and took a seat, still catching my breath from the walk. He asked about my training, and I gave him a thumbs up, saying it was going well but needed more polishing. He had already ordered a banana split, which made me laugh in delight. He explained that we always had the regular cones, so trying the banana split again sounded fun. We picked up our spoons at the same time and counted down together before making our first bites and cheering the moment in our own enthusiastic way. The banana split was sugary and perfect. I admitted that I had missed it, feeling giddy. Midoriya nodded in agreement, smiling as he enjoyed the familiar taste. We ate and talked, the easy camaraderie between us settling like a comfortable blanket. The afternoon passed pleasantly as we caught up and shared the kind of small moments that had always made our friendship feel steady and true. YN was glad she had decided on the treat. She giggled and ate the banana split with glee, unaware that Izuku Midoriya kept glancing at her with a flustered, shy expression. After they finished, YN and Midoriya took a stroll before heading home. They walked through the shopping district and had their usual conversation, but after 10 or 15 minutes Midoriya went quiet, appearing lost in thought. YN wondered if he was worried about the upcoming sports festival and decided to try to brighten the mood. YN told Midoriya good luck and said she would be cheering for him at the festival. Midoriya turned toward her, amazed, and his lips formed a soft, shy smile. Midoriya said he would cheer for her too, and then faltered, his blush deepening. He told YN that she was an amazing person who worked hard, that she was kind, friendly, and trustworthy, and then hesitated before continuing. Midoriya smiled more naturally, an endearing sight to YN. He reminded her that she had accepted him when he was quirkless and had been a great friend ever since they met as children. YN's eyes widened and her heart skipped a beat. She said his name in awe, and Midoriya looked away briefly, nervously fidgeting with his thumbs. Midoriya then admitted that he loved YN. He confessed that he had carried a crush on her for a long time, that being with her made his heart race and that she often appeared in his thoughts during difficult times, helping him feel better. He explained that he had wanted to tell her back in middle school but had hesitated because he did not want to risk their childhood friendship. He added that he had planned the hangout not only to spend time together but also to finally get his feelings off his chest. There was a pause, and YN could hear him sniff quietly as he struggled with his nerves. Midoriya said he understood if she did not feel the same. YN responded that she loved Midoriya too. Midoriya's eyes widened and shone at her reply. YN told him that she had felt the same way but had tried to hide it out of fear that he might not like her back. Midoriya nodded at every word, and YN said that hearing his confession made her happier than she had ever felt. She told Izuku that being with him was amazing, heartwarming, and fulfilling, and that he always came to her aid whenever she was going through something in her life. They stared into each other's eyes for a few seconds, and she felt that she would cherish the moment forever. Izuku stepped closer with a bit of hesitation and gently cupped her face with strong yet tender hands. He asked if she really meant it, a smile beginning to form on his lips. She felt her cheeks warm at his touch and returned the gesture, caressing his cheeks and telling him yes. His eyes sparkled and his smile widened with pure happiness. She noticed tears gathering at the edges of his eyes. He leaned closer and rested his forehead against hers in a quiet, enemy moment. She wrapped her arms around his neck and they shared an innocent, tender embrace that warmed both of their hearts. That moment was what she had dreamed of back in middle school, and she could hardly believe it had come true. After exchanging a few more gentle gestures, they let go and leaned their foreheads together. Izuku said that it had been amazing, and she agreed, giggling as she looked into his green eyes. He looked back, his cheeks flushed, appearing endearingly shy. Izuku asked if she would be his girlfriend and promised to do whatever it took to keep her happy and safe. She nodded enthusiastically, gave him a double thumbs up, and hugged him. He chuckled, hugged her back tightly with tears in his eyes, and thanked her. He told her that she looked so pretty up close. She felt her cheeks warm and playfully poked his cheek, telling him that he was very cute. He wiped his tears and rested his forehead against hers again. They both told each other that they loved one another. Thus, childhood friends became childhood sweethearts, and their new relationship felt like a field of flowers blooming in spring. A week after the sports festival, it had been 7 days since Izuku and she had become a couple. The whole class 1A knew about their relationship after Kirishima and Kaminari saw them holding hands on the way home. Both of them had been flustered by the praise and congratulations from their classmates and were glad everyone was happy for them. While she was pausing her notes for the week, she looked up to see a red-faced Izuku standing nearby. She smiled and asked if he was ready to go. He nodded, picked up his backpack, fixed his necktie, and asked if he might hold her hand. She told him that of course he could and laughed, reminding him that they had already held hands when the class found out. He laughed, scratched the back of his neck, and thanked her. As they walked toward the train station, Izuku, still blushing, asked if she had any plans for the next day. When she said she was free, he asked if she would go on a date with him. He apologized if he had been too forward and nervously explained that he really wanted to ask her. She happily accepted and hopped with excitement, teasing that she would accept his forwardness. He asked again in excitement, squeezed her hand, and smiled broadly, promising that he would make sure they had a great first date. The next morning, she hurried to get ready and went downstairs with her shoulder bag. She found Izuku greeting her mother politely by the front door, bowing in a respectful manner. Her mother smiled and asked what had brought him there. When Izuku spotted her coming down the stairs, he waved at her with a wide smile and jokingly imitated a heroic voice, making her laugh as she ran toward the door. Her mother guessed that he was taking her out on a date and, knowing Izuku well from their childhood, welcomed him warmly. She noticed his bandaged arm from the sports festival and patted his fluffy hair, telling him to take good care of her. Izuku nodded determinedly and promised he would. Her mother kissed her on the forehead, told them to have fun on their first date, and suggested that they could join them for dinner later. Her mother assured her that her father would be delighted. She nodded happily and turned to Midoriya, who was smiling shyly and immediately took her hand as he had the day before. Midoriya asked if they should go and gently squeezed her hand. Since their meeting time was noon, Midoriya had chosen a charming restaurant where guests could spend time with puppies. It was essentially a dog cafe combined with a restaurant. 2 employees, twins, welcomed them to Woof Woof Resto and asked if they wanted a table for 2. Midoriya responded shyly that they did, and she smiled at how adorable he looked. The twins saluted cutely and searched the usually crowded space, but they found a window seat with a view of the city and announced they had found the perfect spot for a couple. They followed the twins, holding hands. When they arrived, they sat down and a group of puppies bounded over with excitement. She greeted them and picked one up. Midoriya did the same and showed her the beagle he had chosen. He commented that the beagle was cute and gently took its paw to make it look like it was waving at her. She squealed and waved back with the paw of the dog she held and joked that she did not know which was cuter, him or the puppy. His cheek flushed at her remark, and the beagle nuzzled his chin affectionately, which made her smile and feel her own cheeks warm. They received a generous plate of carbonara to share and 2 slices of cheesecake for dessert. Between courses they fed the puppies with treats provided by an employee, enjoying the chance to bond with the animals. She offered a treat to a blonde Pomeranian, which approached cautiously before accepting it. Midoriya watched her play with an affectionate expression while brushing the beagle's fur. She held the Pomeranian up to show him, remarking that the dog reminded her of someone. The Pomeranian barked at Midoriya, startling him and prompting nervous laughter. She set the Pomeranian down so it could play with the others and not bother him. She sat beside Midoriya and asked how his beagle was. His cheeks warmed from the closeness and he smiled. He said the beagle seemed well trained, having fetched a ball when he threw it, and patted the dog's head. She stroked the beagle and kissed the top of its head, mentioning that she had never had a dog but hoped to have one someday. Midoriya nodded and wrapped an arm around her shoulder to place a gentle kiss on her forehead. He said he hoped she would and that he wanted to take care of a dog with her. She looked up, and they shared a tender, quiet moment, gazing at each other. Before anything more could happen, 2 white Shih Tzus hurried over and crowded around her. She laughed and petted them, offering them treats. When she turned back, she saw Midoriya looking a little pouty while still holding the beagle. Her heart fluttered at his reaction, and on impulse she leaned in and gave him a brief, innocent kiss. He looked surprised, then returned the gesture with a shy peck before anyone could notice. Midoriya apologized with a nervous laugh and explained that the puppies had interrupted his chance to be first. He admitted he enjoyed her affection and found himself wanting more. She smiled and stroked his cheek, reminding him to be mindful since they were in a public place. Midoriya agreed, flustered, and suggested they finish bonding with the puppies before he took her somewhere special. When she asked where, he kissed her again quickly and said that it would be a surprise. After an hour or 2, they finished their lunch and time with the puppies and began walking to the destination Midoriya had promised. Midoriya asked how she had liked the restaurant, looking at her with gentle green eyes. She nodded and said she had had a wonderful time. YN said that she had actually wanted to go there before and asked how he had known. Midoriya laughed, squeezed her hand, and explained that he knew she loved dogs, puppies, and pasta, so he had chosen that place for their first date. YN smiled as Midoriya suddenly picked up speed. Midoriya announced that they had arrived and ran ahead with a bright smile. YN asked where they were, then fell silent when they reached their destination, a local park with swan gondola boats that couples could row together. Midoriya grinned like a ball of sunshine. YN admitted she had never expected it and noted that the gondolas had not been there before. Midoriya said the attraction had just opened last week and that it had been crowded with couples when it first opened. They walked to the pier, paid for the ride, and a female employee wished them a good time with a giggle. Midoriya helped YN into the boat before boarding himself. YN said that teamwork would be key when rowing the boat together, and Midoriya nodded. After 2 or 3 tries, they found a rhythm and began to row together. YN laughed, enjoying the motion, and Midoriya giggled at her excitement. Midoriya said he was happy to hear she was enjoying it and added that seeing her happy would always be one of his favorite moments. YN felt her cheeks warm and smiled, telling him she felt the same and calling him Izuku. After those heartfelt exchanges, Midoriya asked YN to stop the boat for a while. They were now in the middle of the pond. YN asked if something was wrong. Midoriya looked to his left and pointed out the colors of the sky. He told YN to look over there. YN nodded, and when she turned to where he was looking, she widened with amazement. The sunset painted the sky in reds, oranges, and yellows, and a flock of birds flew along the horizon in synchrony. YN called the view beautiful and smiled. Lost in the sight, she did not immediately notice something in her hair. When she touched it, she found a floral hair clip. YN began to ask if it was his, then stopped when she turned to see Midoriya blushing and smiling. Midoriya said the clip was for her, that she looked beautiful with it, and that it would be their memento from their first date together. He hoped she liked it. Midoriya moved closer, gently, arranging her hair so he could cup her cheeks. YN said she loved it and thanked him, caressing his hands as they held her face. Midoriya's eyes sparkled at her response. They shared a tender, affectionate embrace and touched foreheads, smiling. Midoriya told YN that he loved her. Ashido, Hagakure, and I finally finished our group project at Hagakure's house, in her bedroom. Ashido patted our shoulders and complimented our work, noting that at least we would not have to procrastinate the day before the SBMSN. Hagakure sighed and reminded everyone about the last time they had a class-wide project, when the whole group had procrastinated because they were focused on training for the sports festival. I nodded in agreement while drinking the orange juice Hagakure had served. My phone rang with a text. The name on the screen made me smile. Izuku. He asked if I was free. I giggled at the message and replied that I had just finished the group project for Midnight's class. Izuku asked where I was and suggested meeting at my house because he had rented a movie for us to watch together. I agreed and called it a date. He responded that he could not wait and told me he loved me. I replied that I loved him back. Hagakure and Ashido noticed my reaction to the texts and teased me. I blushed and admitted I had been texting someone. Ashido guessed it was Midoriya, and Hagakure announced that they knew we had been dating for a few weeks. I shyly confirmed that we were doing well. He had already taken me on a date a few days earlier and was happy to have me by his side. Ashido and Hagakure squealed with delight and fangirled over the relationship while I laughed at their reactions. I thanked them for the food and orange juice, told them I had somewhere to go, and left. Hagakure walked me to the door, waved goodbye, and invited me to visit anytime. Once outside, I texted Izuku that I was on my way. He replied quickly, saying he loved me again. I read the message with a smile. That night, sunlight woke me the next morning. I groaned and pulled the blanket over my head, then checked the clock and panicked when I realized I might be late for school. As I rushed toward the bathroom, Izuku sent a good morning message asking if I was already on my way. I admitted that I had just woken up. He mentioned that he had also woken up late and was getting ready to shower, so I decided to postpone the conversation and told him I was going to shower as well. He said he would meet me in front of my house. I kissed my mother on the cheek, grabbed a bacon and egg sandwich to go, and hurried out. Izuku stood outside in his uniform, fixing his hair. He smiled when he saw me and reassured me that I was right on time before taking my hand and offering to go together. We managed to catch a train toward UA, but it was rush hour and the carriage was crowded. We complained quietly about the crowd, then got off at our stop and ran toward the school, hoping to make it to homeroom on time. I sighed as I stood in the corner holding the rail with my freckled boyfriend because there were no other seats available. The train suddenly stopped and I nearly bumped the back of my head. Midoriya looked concerned and asked if I was okay, calling me his angel. My heart skipped a beat at the nickname. I giggled and said I liked it, and the train started moving again. Midoriya's cheeks flushed and he looked away, embarrassed. He admitted that he had wanted to call me that since yesterday but had not had the courage, and he added that he did not know if I would like it. I told him I loved it and gave him a quick, affectionate peck on the cheek. He smiled, still flustered, and explained that he had thought of the nickname because I was kind, helpful, and beautiful. He squeezed both of my hands. My cheeks warmed at his words and I smiled back like an idiot. I asked if I had any other nicknames besides Angel. Midoriya thought for a moment and, with a shy smile, said he could also call me Sweetie because I was so kind, or Cupcake because I seemed soft and warm inside and out. He brightened as he said the last one and covered his face with his hands. The train stopped again and I stumbled into Midoriya's arms. I apologized and he reassured me that it was fine. He wrapped his arms around me in a protective, affectionate hug and asked, in a shy voice, if I minded staying like that and being called Cupcake. For a moment I was speechless at the nickname, then realized my face had grown red. I asked about the people around us. Midoriya said he did not think they would notice since everyone was cramped, rested his chin on my head, and admitted he felt like hugging me. I smiled and returned the hug, snuggling against his chest. He explained again that Cupcake felt right because I was soft and irresistible when he hugged me. A short, comfortable silence followed as the train moved on. Later, I returned from the kitchen with a tray of snacks and refreshments I had prepared for my freckled boyfriend, who had put his homework aside. Midoriya noticed the food and asked if it was my mother's chocolate chip cookie recipe. I nodded and told him I had baked them just for him. His eyes lit up and he asked if they were really for him. I laughed softly and set the tray on the coffee table. I poured fresh milk into his glass and explained that I had put my heart into making the cookies and had made plenty so we could share. The warm aroma of the cookies filled the room. Midoriya admired how delicious they looked and asked if it was a good time to eat. I suggested we take a break from our math homework, and he agreed, admitting the work was draining his brain. We laughed together. When Midoriya tried a cookie, he closed his eyes and said it was delicious, praising my effort and noting that I had mastered the recipe. I told him it had taken me a few tries to get it right and that I had added white chocolate chips this time. Midoriya checked the cookie, smiled, and called it an improvised version. I laughed and said I liked his description. We continued talking as we shared the cookies until the plate was empty. Midoriya told me he loved the cookies and that they were sweet and soft, in a way that reminded him of me. He leaned in and pressed a gentle, affectionate kiss to my cheek, thanking me and smiling shyly as he said he loved me. I blushed at his earnestness and felt my heart swell at how precious he was. Class ended and the afternoon had passed quickly. Today had been unexpectedly fun. The lesson had turned into a lively game of King of the Hill led by All Might, and one of the boys had been dressed up as a girl by Kaminari as part of a prank on Mineta, which had everyone laughing. Ida waved and said goodbye to Midoriya and me with a polite smile. Uraraka returned the smile and said they would see us tomorrow. Midoriya nodded with a grin, waved back, and asked if I was ready to go. I finished double-checking my backpack and told him I was ready, taking his hand. Midoriya blushed at the contact and smiled shyly. Our classmates reacted with a chorus of teasing admiration, which made both of us blush as we left the classroom hand in hand. After leaving the school, we stopped at a crepe shop because I felt hungry. A friendly employee took our order and handed over a large crepe that was on display, smiling and wishing us a good date. Both of us blushed and laughed. Midoriya bowed politely to thank her. There were no other customers, so we chose a table by a wall covered in cute doodles. Midoriya placed the crepe between us and remarked that he had never seen one so big. I laughed and agreed, and he suggested we start eating. The first bites felt like tasting a tiny, delightful paradise. We both smiled and savored the crepe. As we ate, Midoriya watched me with a soft smile. I told him it had been a long time since I had a crepe, and when I noticed he had been looking at me, I pressed a quick kiss to his cheek. He felt his heart jump and his face warmed into a shy blush. I kissed his other cheek and thanked him for the treat. Midoriya rubbed his red cheek and said he was glad I enjoyed it. The next morning, Midoriya greeted me with a shy smile at the door, holding something hidden behind his back. He asked me to close my eyes, and when I did he placed a small flower in my hair at my ear. I smiled and asked if it was my favorite small flower. He said he had received it from a kind, older florist after he had helped her during an encounter with a villain, and upon learning it was my favorite, he wanted to give it to me to brighten my day. I thanked him and he squeezed my hand before urging us to hurry so we would not miss the train. They rode the train together, it was not too crowded, and Midoriya went to a vending machine to buy water he had forgotten at home. While he chose a drink, I looked at photos on my phone and smiled at a selfie of us from a day we had played DDR at an arcade. Someone called my name from a distance, and when I turned around I recognized Hachiro, a childhood friend and former neighbor from Shibuya. I had almost not recognized him after so many years, but his glasses made him familiar. Hachiro greeted me warmly and hugged me, surprised and pleased to see me again. She greeted Hachiro and told him she had been doing well and was about to go to school. When Hachiro noticed her uniform and realized which school she attended, his eyes widened and he exclaimed that attending UA was amazing. He gave her a high five and, grinning, told her that once she graduated she would become a fine pro hero. She thanked Hachiro and they continued catching up. As they talked, she felt someone staring and sensed a slight, intimidating vibe. Before Hachiro could say anything else, Midoriya suddenly appeared at her side and took her in a tight, protective hold. He looked different, with a mixed expression, lips pursed and eyebrows knitted, and his grip felt urgent and tense. Midoriya urged that they should get going so they would not be late, his tone serious and hurried. She blinked at his sudden change of behavior and reassured him that she would see him later. Hachiro smiled awkwardly while Midoriya frowned at him, then turned away. She shook her head and moved forward. On the walk to you, Midoriya kept his arm around her side. She noted how unusual his behavior was. He tended to be shy in close moments, and this side of him was unfamiliar. After a long silence since leaving the station, Midoriya asked who the man she had been with earlier was. She explained that he had been her childhood friend from Shibuya, that he had moved to Mizudafu to live on his own, and that he was staying in a dorm with his cousin. Midoriya swallowed and admitted that seeing the friend hug her and talk closely had made him feel upset. He looked down and confessed that he did not want anyone to take her away. They happened to be standing under a tree, the cool shade offering a quiet moment. She realized then why Midoriya had been acting differently and smiled softly. Midoriya stepped closer and embraced her in a reassuring hug, wrapping his arms around her in front. He asked, with a vulnerable expression, if she was his. She nodded and reassured him that she would always be his and that no one would take her away. Midoriya smiled slowly at her words and held her tighter, then kissed the top of her nose playfully and told her he loved her. She laughed and returned that she loved him too, teasing him about being a cute, jealous boyfriend. His cheeks flushed red and he nuzzled against her hair to hide his embarrassment. It's been about a week since the fall of Stain, the hero killer. When the narrator learned that Midoriya had fought alongside Ida and Todoroki, everyone in Class 1A had been shocked. Thankfully, after they were discharged from the hospital, the three boys were all right with no major injuries. Ida was wearing an arm support and would need time to heal. Todoroki had a small scratch on his cheek. Midoriya, as usual, was tired from using too much of his quirk. When the school bell rang, class was dismissed and everyone began leaving the classroom. Midoriya called the narrator over shyly and asked if she was busy after school, nervously inviting her to his apartment. The narrator checked her schedule and answered that she was free and would like to treat him. The narrator stood and squeezed Midoriya's hands, explaining that since he had not taken credit for saving people and stopping Stain in Hosu, she wanted to make sure he got the recognition he deserved. Midoriya looked moved and close to tears. He thanked her and hugged her tightly, resting his cheek against hers and sniffling. He told her he loved her and grew quiet and emotional. They shared a brief, affectionate moment together. Their moment was interrupted by Boku calling out from the other side of the classroom and telling them to get a room. Kirishima laughed nervously and apologized for Boku's outburst. Midoriya said it was fine and admitted he might have gotten carried away. Kirishima teased lightly about the small group in the room and waved goodbye before leaving. The narrator and Midoriya left the classroom hand in hand. Later, at Midoriya's apartment, The narrator returned for the second time with a batch of white chocolate cookies with chocolate chips. She placed some on the coffee table and brought a note with cookies to leave in the kitchen for Midoriya's mother in case she came home late. Midoriya tasted a cookie and smiled, murmuring that it was delicious. The narrator sat beside him on the couch and watched him enjoy the cookies. Midoriya thanked her and complimented her cooking, laughing and saying he loved it. She blushed and smiled, saying it was her first time making them and that she was happy they had turned out well. Midoriya hugged her in appreciation and then stood to get a movie. He found a hero film on DVD and suggested they watch it together. The narrator agreed eagerly, and he set up the TV. Halfway through the movie, both of them were absorbed in the action sequences and commented quietly on the heroic moments. At some point the narrator found herself leaning against Midoriya's shoulder. Midoriya rested his hand gently on her shoulder and admitted he had wanted to cuddle but had been nervous to ask. They settled closer together, comfortable and warm as they watched the film. YN felt her heart skip a beat at his request, but she obliged and nodded before getting cozy with her freckled boyfriend. She told him that she was treating him because he deserved it and called him her hero. Midoriya blushed and smiled, and he said that he was so happy she was his girlfriend and that being next to her made him feel safe and loved. YN smiled widely at his words and they settled in to continue watching the hero film, sitting close and comfortable in each other's arms. Later, when YN visited Midoriya's apartment, she offered to help clean after seeing him dusting the shelves. She wiped sweat from her brow and said she was happy to help. Midoriya admitted he had been embarrassed to ask, but he accepted her insistence with a shy smile. He thanked her and, returning from the kitchen, set 2 slices of her second favorite cake on the table. YN reacted dreamily at the sight, and Midoriya asked if she liked that flavor. She explained that it had become her new favorite, which made his eyes sparkle and his smile widen. He confessed that he had thought her first favorite flavor would always be her top choice. They chatted about school, weekend plans, and memories while sharing their slices of cake. As YN recounted a story from middle school, Midoriya slipped into a gentle hug from behind with a tender expression. He pressed close in a friendly, comforting way, and YN flinched slightly at the unexpected contact. Midoriya immediately checked that she was all right and reassured her that he had not used his quirk on her. YN laughed and explained that she was fine but a bit ticklish at the back of her neck. Midoriya mused that he did not remember her being ticklish when they were kids. He then hugged her more gently and said that hearing her laugh was one of the things he liked about her. It put him at peace. YN squeezed his hand and told him she was okay, rubbing his back in comfort. On another afternoon, YN looked for Midoriya because he had called earlier to ask about their pair project for Midnight's class and she had most of their notes. She texted him with no response and suspected he had gone out for an afternoon jog. After checking her watch and roaming the usual jogging spots while humming and glancing at her phone, she almost decided to return to the dorm when she spotted him running toward her, slightly sweaty but smiling as always. She laughed and they embraced, though the contact startled him briefly and he pulled away a bit, apologizing and checking that she was all right. YN reassured him and they shared a relieved laugh before heading back together. Midoriya smiled and hugged himself slightly, explaining that he had not expected his sides to be so sensitive. I raised a brow and asked if he really meant his sides. I thought back to the hug we had just shared and realized I had accidentally brushed his sides while reaching to wrap my arms around him. I felt a playful smile and decided to test the idea. I suggested trying the hug again and added that this time we should do it properly. Midoriya laughed, wiped his sweat with a towel, and affectionately called me his angel. I giggled and we embraced warmly. While holding him, I gently traced one side with my fingertips, which made him jump. Midoriya laughed in surprise and tried to fend off my touch, clearly caught off guard but smiling. I playfully tickled both of his sides as he tried to hold on. I reminded him that this was payback for tickling me the day before and admitted my curiosity about what would happen. Midoriya laughed and pleaded that I stop, but after a while I let up when he looked like he was nearly at his limit. He caught his breath and admitted he had not been tickled in a while, teasing that I was very playful. I giggled and gave his cheek a brief, affectionate peck. I then asked if it had helped relieve the fatigue from his jog, and he smiled warmly in response, calling me his hero and angel. Later, I tipped the DLVI person 20 yen for getting my online order here quickly. The DLVI person was surprised by the kindness, flashed a grateful smile, and left. Ashido, Kirishima, and Aoyama ran up to me by the school gates during break, curious about the package. Kirishima teased whether it was something manly, while Ashido suggested it might be the coloring materials I had been interested in. I pointed to Ashido in confirmation and laughed that the shipping had been surprisingly fast. Aoyama looked a little disappointed, admitting he had hoped it was a makeup item or accessory. Ashido teased that it might be for future dates with Midoriya, which made my face heat up. I laughed sheepishly and said I already had enough of that kind of thing at home. Kirishima cut in with a grin and asked how Midoriya and I were doing, and Aoyama chimed in with his curious flair. I walked back toward the cafeteria with them and replied that we were both doing well. I described Midoriya as an adorable gentleman and a warm cuddler, which made all three of them coo at once, and Ashido seemed almost overwhelmed by the cuteness. Aoyama nodded knowingly and remarked that it sounded like Midoriya. Kirishima admitted he had trouble imagining Midoriya as a cuddler because of his shyness, but he conceded that people sometimes tried new things when they were with someone special. Smiled and gave Kirishima a fist bump in thanks. Ashido then teased about whether Midoriya was good at showing affection, and Aoyama, playing along, urged her to rate his romantic gestures on a playful scale. Before I could answer, my phone vibrated with a message from Midoriya suggesting we go eat outside for a change. I accepted and told him I would be there right away. I waved the others goodbye, promising I would give them more details later, and headed back into the school building. I finally arrived at the grassy field where we usually met. They had planned to hang out and eat during their free time, but Midoriya had not arrived yet. She wondered if she had come too early, then shrugged and sat down under the big shade tree, leaning against the trunk with a sigh. She took out her phone and looked through photos of herself and Midoriya from previous dates. He looked really cute when he blushed in the pictures, and she smiled at the memories. After a while of swiping, sleepiness crept in and her eyes became heavy. She slowly lowered her hand and placed the phone on her lap, getting comfortable. A few minutes later she woke to find Midoriya standing nearby, flushed and looking shy. He stammered that she was awake and asked if he had taken long, thumb twiddling awkwardly. She smiled tiredly, shook her head and stretched. She told him he was on time and offered a reassuring smile. Midoriya blushed more and admitted that seeing her looking peaceful had made him smile. He had wanted to get closer, but then caught himself. She laughed softly at his nervous rambling and calmed him by producing a snack she had saved for him, which made him stop and smile. Midoriya apologized and suggested they eat and maybe go somewhere together after school. The next day at UA, Midoriya had asked her out again for after school. She welcomed the idea. The week had been hectic, and she was happy to have free time. She stretched and thought about how nice it would be to finally have the weekend. Midoriya agreed that the hard work had been worth it. She giggled and nodded, then took his hand. He smiled and squeezed back. She asked where they would go, playfully calling him Hero, and he blushed when she used the nickname. He said he was thinking they could just look around and choose somewhere if something interesting caught their eye. They set off on a little scavenger hunt to decide on a spot for their mini after-school date. Their stroll turned out to be useful. She remembered she needed to buy something for the house, and Midoriya led her to a nearby convenience store that happened to be close to a pastel-colored milkshake cafe. Midoriya admired the cafe's warm, cute decor. She told him the place had opened about a month ago and suggested they hang out there after she finished shopping, recommending their milkshakes. When Midoriya asked if she had been there before, she nodded happily and squeezed his hand. He smiled shyly and hugged her arm in response. She mentioned she had gone with Momo and Jiro. The narrator laughed and recalled that they had almost had the urge to buy another the last time they were here, remembering Momo's reaction and how she wanted to stay longer while Jiro urged everyone to leave before dark. Midoriya laughed at the story, and they went into Family Mart to pick up supplies for the house before heading to the milkshake cafe. A female employee welcomed them with a playful nickname and handed them a flyer, explaining that the cafe recommended a 2-in-1 milkshake exclusive for couples. A male employee added that it was discounted for the week. Midoriya accepted the offer on the narrator's behalf with a smile, and the narrator squeezed his hand and asked for one order of the 2-in-1 milkshake. The employees said the order would be ready shortly. When the milkshake arrived, both of them admired its colorful look but found the cafe too crowded to stay. Midoriya suggested they take their treat to the jungle gym at the park where they had first met. Arriving at the park filled the narrator with nostalgia. The narrator giggled and said that it brought back memories. Midoriya agreed that if the narrator had not come here, they might never have met or become this close. He squeezed the narrator's hand and pressed a gentle kiss to the top of their head, making the narrator smile. They settled on the jungle gym and took their first sips of the big milkshake, smiling like children. The narrator told Midoriya about an encounter at the train station involving Mineta and Kaminari and Yaoyorozu's brusque reply, which made the narrator try not to laugh. Midoriya listened affectionately, and the narrator suddenly noticed him hugging them. The narrator worried there might be something on their face and reached for their phone to check, but Midoriya gently laughed, shook his head, and brushed a stray strand of hair aside. Midoriya admitted shyly that he loved looking at the narrator and that he was very happy to have met them, unable to imagine his life without them. The narrator returned the sentiment and smiled. Midoriya moved closer and whispered that he hoped the narrator did not mind. He leaned in and they shared a soft, tender kiss. The narrator cupped Midoriya's freckled cheeks, and the moment remained gentle and affectionate. After a little while, their embrace deepened into a longer, heartfelt kiss, and then they slowly broke apart, out of breath and holding each other. Midoriya apologized with flustered embarrassment, worrying that he had gotten carried away and explaining that the milkshake had made the narrator's lips sweet. The narrator reassured him with a laugh, saying that they had enjoyed the moment. Midoriya relaxed visibly and smiled with relief, nuzzling and massaging the narrator's cheeks affectionately. Midoriya then asked, shyly and earnestly, if he could kiss the narrator again. The narrator agreed, and they sat together on the jungle gym, close and content. It's finally the end of October and the students at UA had been looking forward to Halloween for weeks. Because Cementos had missed his class the previous week, he held a short special session before the school's official Halloween party so everyone could still prepare. He kept it brief, only half an hour, and some classmates reacted with surprised gratitude. Kaminari even hugged him, which made everyone laugh. After several hours of getting ready, night fell and the costumes were finally on. The narrator's costume had been a last-minute project but turned out well, a female ghost that matched her levitation quirk. Yaoyorozu had helped with the simple Halloween makeup, and she was about to take a mirror selfie for her mother when her phone vibrated. Izuku Midoriya texted, calling her Cupcake and asking if she was already in the gymnasium. She replied that she was in the restroom and asked if he had just arrived. Midoriya answered that he was with Ida and suggested they meet at the buffet area. He said he could not wait to see her. When she stepped out, Billie Eilish played from the gym speakers part of Jairu's playlist and she tapped her foot to the beat. Costumes were everywhere. Classmates smiled, shouted playful scares, and complimented each other's outfits. At the buffet area, she found Ida dressed as Frankenstein and Midoriya in a ghost costume like hers but with a pumpkin motif. The coincidence made her grin. She blended into the crowd for a moment, then circled back behind Midoriya and slipped her arms around his waist to surprise him. He yelped before turning and laughing, covering his face in embarrassment and delight. Midoriya exclaimed that it had been a good surprise. They shared a brief, affectionate hug before she let him go. Midoriya took in her costume and pointed out the similarity to his own, joking about the differences. She explained that she had made the outfit last minute and that it was a cat-themed version. He smiled and told her it was amazing and that seeing her made him happy. He then took both of her hands and pressed them gently. The official UA Halloween party continued for hours, and eventually the dance floor opened. Kaminari and Kirishima ended up having a dance-off in the center. Kaminari hesitated because the songs chosen were upbeat female pop tracks, but Kirishima encouraged him, saying that confidence would carry the moment and that it would be a great way to show it. That convinced Kaminari, and the two threw themselves into a lively, energetic routine to a popular upbeat song, drawing cheers from their classmates. YN and Midoriya spent time with classmates and students from other classes, including Kendo from Class B, Shinso from General Studies, Tetsu from Class B, and Hatsum Mei from Support Course Class 1H, who enthusiastically showed off her gadgets just like she had during the sports festival against Ida. They were enjoying the evening with friends when Midoriya signaled he wanted some time alone with YN. YN set down an orange juice from the buffet and smiled at him. Midoriya looked distracted and fidgety, glancing left and right before taking both of YN's hands. He suggested doing something different tonight and admitted he had a plan, sounding nervous. Midoriya led YN outside the gymnasium, saying he would reveal the surprise soon. They walked to a large, long-abandoned house. The two-story house with an attic window had scratched siding, loose boards, a front yard of wilted plants, and a swing set with one seat hanging half-detached. Midoriya checked a piece of paper he had been holding and wondered aloud whether it could be a realistic prop or an illusion. He hoped Monoma had given the right address. When YN asked what was going on, Midoriya hesitated but then explained that Monoma had called him during the dance and dared him to take YN to a haunted house. He confessed that he accepted the dare partly because he did not want Monoma to think he was a coward and risk Monoma trying to get close to YN. YN reassured him that the rejections of Monoma had happened before they became a couple and that there was nothing to worry about. YN hugged Midoriya and kissed both of his freckled cheeks, then reminded him that Monoma had been interested from the moment he first saw YN at UA. Midoriya relaxed at hearing this and suggested they treat the dare as a test of courage. They entered the house together. The floorboards creaked ominously and both jumped at the sound. Midoriya laughed nervously and apologized when the noise proved to be only a loose floorboard. He had come prepared with 2 flashlights and some Snickers bars in case they got hungry. Midoriya turned on his flashlight and explained that Monoma's condition was for them to stay in the haunted house and explore it for an hour to complete the dare. A cold wind made YN hug themselves, and they hoped they could bear the eerie atmosphere. They moved through dark rooms, Midoriya doing his best to stay brave while YN tried not to be frightened. At one point YN tripped over something unseen on the floor and fell harder than expected. Midoriya panicked, quickly found YN, and helped them up, asking with concern if they were hurt. YN groaned and then noticed a small cut on their arm. Midoriya produced a bandage and a tissue from his shoulder bag and began to tend the wound. YN laughed and said the bandage was the same green checkered brand from the first time they had met. Midoriya blushed and smiled, explaining that he had always been prepared since he was a child and was glad to be of help now. Midoriya explained that if he had not brought a bandage when they first met, he would have run to the store to buy one. YN laughed and caressed his arm affectionately. Midoriya finished applying the bandage and smoothed it gently. YN thanked him and returned a brief, tender kiss. Midoriya cupped her face and their kiss remained soft and comforting rather than intense. Midoriya whispered that he would do anything for his angel and hero, and then planted a trail of gentle kisses from her forehead toward her chin. YN giggled as he continued his warm, light gestures of affection, but a sudden crash interrupted them when a strong gust of wind knocked a small vase from a shelf and it shattered on the floor. They both started and stepped back, the moment broken by the disturbance. Midoriya laughed nervously, blushed, and suggested they continue later. After exploring the first and second floors, they decided to spend the last part of their visit in the attic, which felt like the scariest part of the house. YN admitted that the haunted house did not seem like something prepared by UA. Midoriya answered that he had thought the same, and they realized Monoma might have led them to a genuinely haunted house. They exchanged worried looks, and Midoriya started to mutter to himself about not seeing anyone else and wondering if the place was really haunted. YN reassured him that she had the same fear and that they were not alone in feeling it. Midoriya took a steadying breath and climbed the ladder to the attic, with YN following. He helped her up and reminded her that they had each other, encouraging both of them to think positively and get through it together. The attic proved larger than either had expected and covered in dust. Midoriya noted that this was their last stop and looked around at the many boxes stacked along the walls. YN used her flashlight to inspect them and found a number of sealed boxes with names and stamps. She surmised the boxes must have belonged to the previous owner. While sorting through them, she sneezed and Midoriya offered a polite response. Their search was cut short when the sky outside began to rumble and a small storm rolled in. YN wiped her nose with a handkerchief and commented that the weather had not been predicted. Midoriya laughed nervously and said that Halloween was full of surprises, noting their matching outfits, their decision to explore the haunted house, and now the unexpected rain. They looked at one another, and Midoriya said that he liked this Halloween because she was in it. YN began to respond when a loud clap of thunder startled them both. They both reacted with a shout and Midoriya quickly pulled YN into a comforting hug, holding her tight. YN reassured him that she was fine but grew more shaken when another, louder clap of thunder rolled through the house. She pressed her face against his chest and trembled. Midoriya soothed her calmly and lifted her face to meet his. He offered a gentle kiss on the forehead and stroked her cheek, telling her that he was there with her. Tears formed at the corners of YN's eyes, but she nodded, grateful for the comfort. YN admitted that she had thought her fear of thunder had gone away since arriving at UA, but it still affected her. Midoriya rubbed her back and told her that it was not something to be embarrassed about. He revealed that he had a fear as well, the fear of being unable to save others and of losing someone important to him. YN listened in awe as Midoriya explained that this fear motivated his training to become the best hero he could be, so he could protect everyone and especially her. He smiled and rocked her gently as they embraced. After a while he checked his watch and realized an hour had passed. Midoriya told YN that it was time to leave and that he would treat her to Halloween milkshakes as a way to end their night on a cheerful note. Since that morning I had been reading the book Yaoyorozu recommended, and she clearly had great taste. She had given me the first volume of a fiction series, and one chapter after another I became completely absorbed. I found myself reading during free time at UA, like during lunch and snack time. Because of that, my conversations with friends and with Midoriya had grown brief. Midoriya noticed and seemed bothered. He wanted more time with me than the short moments I was giving. On that Friday evening, he tried to get my attention. Midoriya came into my home wearing a warm smile. I waved and asked him to make himself at home. My parents were out, but my mother had left some cookies in the dining room for him. He nodded, sighed a little when he saw me still reading, closed the door quietly, and walked to the dining room. Midoriya thanked me for the hospitality, took a cookie, munched on it, and scooted onto the couch beside me. He asked if I was still reading. I smiled, turned the page, and said the book was really good and kept getting more interesting with each chapter. He nodded with a sad smile and asked how long I had been reading it. Without looking up, I explained that I read before school, during breaks, on the train home, and when I arrived. He was surprised and joked about whether the book was contagious, and I laughed, saying this habit started back in middle school. If it were some quirk, I would have asked for his help. He agreed but sighed again because my eyes were still on the pages. Our small conversation continued, and Midoriya grew more aware that I avoided eye contact. He wanted the sort of time we used to have, long conversations, closeness, and comfort. He leaned his head against my shoulder and looked at me with a soft, pleading expression. He said he wanted my attention and that he had missed our closeness, explaining that he had been hoping for more time together these past few days. His gentle words made my heart skip. I tried to protest that I had to finish the part one was reading, but his request became more insistent. He rested close, speaking softly as he reminded me he missed my hugs and affection. He showed small, tender gestures of affection along my forehead and cheek, and his gentle voice made me soften. I sighed, closed the book, and met his eyes. I told him he had won because he was too adorable. He grinned, cupped my face, and kissed me gently. I returned the gesture, wrapping my arms around him and brushing his hair. He murmured that he never thought he'd be jealous of a book and felt embarrassed, apologizing. I laughed and playfully tickled him. He tickled me back. I admitted I had probably gone overboard with the book and placed it on the coffee table, relieved for a break. Midoriya embraced me and stroked my hair, glad to have some time together. Midoriya staggered to his feet amid crushed cars and ruined roads. Citizens fled for their lives. Buildings leaned and windows stared like empty sockets. Everything around him looked abandoned for years, but the devastation had happened only hours earlier when the League of Villains attacked the city with upgraded Nomu creatures. The destruction had been swift and indiscriminate, reaching beyond their own city. Midoriya still did not understand how the Nomu had been enhanced, but he knew the pro-heroes and his classmates had fought hard and driven the attackers back into the dark. He wiped sweat from his forehead and tried to steady himself. Ida, who had been fighting beside him, pushed himself up from under small debris. Midoriya called to Ida and ran toward him, nearly collapsing from exhaustion before catching himself and reaching out to help. Ida stammered that he was okay and forced a tired smile while insisting Midoriya should tend to his own injuries. Midoriya refused and urged Ida to take his hand. Ida sighed and accepted the help, rising carefully with Midoriya steadying him. Midoriya offered a small smile and asked if Ida could walk. Ida nodded, and then his phone began to ring with a loud, familiar ringtone blasting the sonic lyrics. Ida grimaced and complained that Kaminari had changed his ringtone again. Midoriya covered his mouth to hold back a laugh and looked away. Ida glanced at the caller ID and answered immediately, greeting Azui. Azui's voice snapped through the speaker, urgent and panicked, demanding to know where Midoriya was. Midoriya felt the change in tone and grew uneasy. Azui then cried out that they had lost YN and that she was not answering her phone. Midoriya's heart leapt. He grabbed Ida's phone and tried to call YN, but there was no answer after a tense minute and a half. Ida tried to calm Azui, telling her to breathe and that YN was probably somewhere nearby, but the line filled with muffled sobs instead. A choked voice on the other end could barely say YS name. When Midoriya demanded where they were, another voice, Kirishima's, answered that they were at UA's front gate. Midoriya ran toward UA, his chest pounding. He arrived to find Azui, Kirishima, Ju, Ojiro and others gathered at the gate. Many of them bore injuries. Kirishima looked particularly battered. In the center of the group lay YN, motionless and very weak. Midoriya's breath caught. She looked pale and fragile, barely conscious. Midoriya fell to his knees beside her and cradled her face in trembling hands, asking what had happened and checking her condition. Jairu, sobbing, said they had simply found her there, not knowing who had hurt her or why. Kirishima slammed his fist into the ground in frustration, blaming himself for not being with her and voicing the helpless longing that swept through everyone. Midoriya's chest tightened and tears blurred his vision. He whispered YN's name and stroked her cheek, desperate to understand why things had ended up this way. He found her pulse faint and her skin cool. At his whispered call of her name, she blinked and began to open her eyes. Midoriya leaned close and cupped her face, holding her gently and trying to soothe her fear. She managed to speak weakly and apologize, saying she did not think she could make it. Midoriya refused to accept that, brushing hair from her face and reassuring her that it was not her fault and she would be okay. These actions were tense and emotional. Midoriya then shouted for someone to call a pro-hero for medical assistance. A pro-hero called urgently for medical help. Everyone nodded with sad expressions and ran toward the pro-heroes from different directions. Izuku held YN and began to sob quietly, pressing her to him and fighting to breathe. He thought to himself that he did not want to lose her and felt he had failed as a hero for not staying by her side. He berated himself, calling himself an idiot. YN called his name weakly. He told her between sobs that he did not want to lose her and that he had failed. She widened her eyes slightly, shook her head weakly, and touched his hand that rested against her cheek. YN told him that he had not failed and that to her he was still her hero and her boyfriend. Her voice faltered as she tried to continue, then she closed her eyes. As she let go of his hand, she whispered that she loved him very much. Her pulse faded and her breathing stopped. Izuku shook his head and tried to rouse her, but there was no response. He begged her to stay, lifted her slightly to hug her, and pleaded that his world was not the same without her. The more he called out, the more he cried, holding on to his precious childhood friend and girlfriend who had always been there for him. Later, someone told Izuku that they were done cleaning up and it was time to go home. He opened his eyes to the classroom board with only one light on and realized he had fallen asleep after cleaning. He had been dreaming. YN noticed the tears at the corners of his eyes when she woke him and moved closer, gently placing a hand on his shoulder and asking if he was all right. Izuku reacted with relief when he saw her alive and hugged her tightly, breath shaking with gratitude. He brushed a lock of her hair away and expressed how thankful he was that she was not covered in wounds and was instead warm and alive. YN told him to take deep breaths and slowly let him go so she could cup his face and ask what had happened. Izuku, eyes filled with tears and breathing fast, said that he had had a nightmare. He explained the sequence of the dream and how he had seen her die in his arms. As he told her, his voice broke and he began to cry. YN covered her mouth in shock at first, then wrapped her arms around him to comfort him and placed gentle, affectionate touches to reassure him. She told him it was all right, reminded him they were not in a destroyed city, and reassured him that she was alive and holding him. Her words calmed him. His tears began to lessen. She told him not to dwell on the image from the nightmare, calling it a false and negative impression clouding his mind. He nodded, cupping her face carefully though his hands trembled. She smiled and leaned in to press her forehead to his for a moment, offering a quiet, grounding gesture instead of anything more. Izuku relaxed and managed a small, grateful laugh. She teased that she had sounded like All Might, and he laughed in return. Hearing his happy voice warmed her heart. Izuku told her finally that she was his hero. He brushed his lips against her forehead a few times in affectionate reassurance and held her close. He vowed to do whatever it took to be a hero for the people and for her. She felt a sharp, pulsing pain and a ringing in her ears as she landed on rough pavement. When she looked up, everything around her was pitch black, without a single sign of color. YN tried to make sense of it, wondering where she had fallen asleep, but when she reached out, there were no walls to touch. The emptiness made her anxious. The darkness shifted, and she found herself in a narrow alley in Hosu City, the place where Ida had interned. She had fallen hard and moved carefully, spotting a trash pile and a cat slipping out of it. When a loud scream rang out ahead, she hurried toward it. As the shadows parted, she saw two figures, one suddenly striking the other. When her vision finally cleared, she realized the attacker was the hero killer, Stain, and the person being hit was Izuku Midoriya. Shock drained the color from her face. YN shouted at Stain, demanding an explanation, but the hero killer vanished in a puff of smoke and left Midoriya crumpled on the ground. She ran forward and, furious and upset, pounded the pavement with her foot before kneeling beside him. Midoriya was coughing and struggling. YN cupped his face, terrified and frantic, and asked if he was all right. Midoriya tried to form words. He pressed a trembling, affectionate gesture to her hands, attempting to comfort her despite his pain. He said he could not believe it was happening and that he had failed to stop Stain. Tears gathered in both of their eyes. YN attempted to lift him using her levitation quirk, but it failed to respond. Confusion and panic rose in her as she tried again and again with no effect. Midoriya gripped her shirt and urged her not to overexert herself, telling her that what had happened could not be undone. He struggled through the pain, his face paling. YN refused to accept it. She pleaded with him, sobbing that she did not want him to leave and that her life would feel incomplete without him. She insisted that he meant everything to her and that he had always been the most important person in her life. I sobbed once more and lay my head down in despair. Midoriya, by contrast, tried to smile so I would not be sad. Midoriya called her name, his breathing quickening, and told her she would always be the one for him. He said he was relieved she had not been the one harmed by the hero killer, and that was what mattered. I looked at Izuku with sad eyes, and he used the last of his strength to get up slowly and pull me close, pressing a gentle kiss to my forehead. He whispered that he loved me. Those words would be his last. He relaxed, his breathing fading and his eyes beginning to close, a small smile touching his lips. I cried out and held his motionless form while whispering the plans we had made for the future. If only I had made it on time. If only my quirk had activated so I could get him to a hospital. My thoughts ran rampant as I remained hugging him. Then I woke up at Midoriya's house, sitting upright with my breathing rapid. I sighed in relief that it had been a bad dream, but the image of my freckled boyfriend being harmed by Stain would not leave my mind. Kirishima had been trying to get my attention and asked if I was all right, noting that I looked pale and sad. I checked my reflection on my phone and admitted I had just had a nightmare. Kirishima soothed my back as Midoriya returned to the room carrying colored materials and papers, saying he had found them after having a hard time looking. Seeing him alive and smiling made the corners of my eyes wet. Kirishima then said he needed to use the bathroom and hurried out. Midoriya suggested they start decorating but stopped when he noticed me quietly crying. He placed the materials down and rushed over, asking what was wrong and cupping my face. I could not find the words and instead hugged him as the tears continued. Midoriya comforted me, telling me it was okay and that he did not want me to be upset with Kirishima and his mother there. He did not want them to worry. After a moment I collected myself and met his green eyes. I explained that I had had a nightmare in which we were both in darkness and he had been killed by Stain right in front of me. I said I had wanted to save him but my quirk had failed to work. I sobbed as I told him everything. Midoriya listened in stunned silence, clearly worried. I told him that in the dream I had thought I had lost the person I loved most and could not imagine life without him. Midoriya frowned and urged me not to let the nightmare get to me, reminding me that it was not real. He cupped my face and pressed a gentle kiss to the top of my head. He reassured me that he had survived his encounter with Stain and placed my hand on his chest so I could feel his steady heartbeat. He said his heart still beat for the chance to live a wonderful life and to pursue his goal of becoming a professional hero like All Might. He lifted my hand, kissed my fingertips playfully, and smiled, telling me that his heart beat most of all when he was with me. Being with her freckled childhood boyfriend had been the best thing that ever happened to her. She loved the times they spent together, especially the moments that were memorable and cherished. She loved how excited he got over things, particularly anything related to All Might. Most of all, she loved the way he could be so adorable that she wanted to hug him all day. His shyness. She finished changing into her uniform in her room and arrived in the common area right on time. Midoriya noticed her and waved with a shy smile. Midoriya called out that he was glad she had arrived. She smiled at his cute energy and ran to him to give him a big, warm hug. Midoriya's cheeks flushed at the contact. She apologized for taking long. Midoriya laughed nervously and assured her it was fine. She smiled and asked if he was ready to go. Midoriya answered bashfully and then noticed his tie was crooked. He admitted his tie needed fixing, and she offered to do it for him. She adjusted his short red tie, smoothing it into place. Midoriya nodded, still flushed, and she dusted his shoulders. She announced that they were ready, and Midoriya took her hand gently as they left the dorm. Midoriya teased that they had been acting like a married couple, and when she asked him about it he quickly brushed it off and urged them to head to class. His excitement. After school they went on a mini-date and stopped by a shopping bazaar next to the night market. They discovered a limited edition All Might figurine that had just been released, and Midoriya's eyes lit up at the sight. Midoriya excitedly explained that this was the figure everyone on the All Might fan site had been talking about. She confirmed it had been selling out quickly and that the store had run through its first-day stock. Midoriya reacted with surprise and excitement, trying to take it all in. She suggested they buy matching figurines someday, and Midoriya grinned at the idea, saying that they should do that. She added it to her bucket list on her phone and showed it to him. When he saw it, he giggled, hugged her, and briefly lifted her up in his excitement before realizing and putting her down gently. He apologized for getting carried away and laughed that he must have gotten a little too excited. His affection. Later, she set the book Ida had given her on her lap and looked up when she heard Midoriya behind the couch. Midoriya came to sit beside her and said there was nothing wrong but that he had missed her. He explained that they had both been so busy for the week that he had not had a chance to be close to her. Midoriya asked if he could cuddle, looking hopeful. She agreed, and he scooted closer and wrapped his arms around her waist. He rested his forehead against hers and said softly that he missed her. She responded with a warm smile and returned the embrace. Midoriya expressed how much she meant to him, calling her his cupcake and his hero, and he said that he loved her. She laughed gently at his affection and returned his warmth. Sunday, 3 p.m. YN had just finished training at Midoriya's place, and he insisted on coming along for the grocery run her mother had asked her to do before an emergency meeting. Midoriya carried the grocery bag and a small bag of cleaning products while YN held the small bouquet he had given her outside the store. With their free hands, he reached for hers and massaged it gently with his thumb. Midoriya smiled and asked if those were everything on the list. YN nodded after double-checking and confirmed that it was all done. Then YN asked if Midoriya still had time. Midoriya checked his watch, smiled, and said he did. He asked what was on her mind, sounding curious. YN smiled and pulled him toward the park. A little later, YN revealed a medium tub of mixed vanilla and pistachio ice cream and explained that she had bought it for them with some of her allowance. Midoriya looked surprised and a little worried, and he asked if she was sure. YN assured him and reminded him that he had given her the flowers, so she wanted to treat him. Midoriya bowed slightly and said he was very happy, joking that he wished he had an ice quirk to keep the dessert cold like Todoroki. They sat on the grass with a view of a sky streaked with pink and blue and began to enjoy the ice cream. YN murmured that it tasted wonderful, smiling contentedly. Midoriya enjoyed the treat but also watched YN with a happy, attentive expression. When a couple at a distance caught his eye, an idea crossed his face. Midoriya picked a small forget-me-not nearby and moved closer to tuck it behind YN's ear. YN realized he was near and felt the flower in her hair. Midoriya explained that he thought it would look cute on her because she had looked so cute eating the ice cream. YN blushed, thanked him, and touched the flower, remembering when he had given her similar blooms before. Midoriya laughed nervously and brushed off his flustered reaction. After a moment, Midoriya mimicked the couple they had watched and offered YN a spoonful of ice cream. He prompted her to open her mouth, smiling shyly as he held the spoon. YN obliged and savored the taste, making a small dance of delight on the grass. Midoriya said he loved seeing her so happy. Feeling encouraged, Midoriya leaned closer and gently cupped YN's face, expressing how cute he thought she was. YN laughed and insisted that he was cuter. Midoriya protested and pouted, then reached for another scoop of ice cream. YN playfully reached up and tapped Midoriya's cheek, teasing that he had been so adorable she wanted to shower him with affection. Midoriya replied that YN was the one who made him want to be cuddly like a teddy bear and then tickled her sides. YN laughed and tried to protest but couldn't resist since she was holding the ice cream tub. They continued their light-hearted teasing until YN wrapped her arms around Midoriya in a warm, affectionate hug. Midoriya returned the embrace, holding her gently. YN laughed and said that meant they both won, and Midoriya, smiling with a soft, adorable voice, agreed as they shared the rest of the ice cream together. Midoriya told her that she was the cutest between them and that he did not want anyone to take her away. Midoriya paced in front of YN's house, worried that she was not answering her phone or the door. They had planned to work on their pair project at her place while his mother cleaned their apartment, and he hoped she was not ill. He tried to calm himself and told himself she was probably safe or maybe out shopping, though he remembered they had shopped together recently. He considered knocking again. YN's mother appeared at the door in her work clothes with a smile. Midoriya greeted her politely and bowed. She asked what he was doing at the house and said she had expected YN and Midoriya to be working on their project. Midoriya explained that YN had not answered the door or his calls. YN's mother speculated that YN might have taken a long afternoon nap and apologized, saying YN may not have had enough sleep. Midoriya laughed nervously and suggested that YN might have worked ahead on parts of their project, which made her mother laugh and agree that determination suited YN well. YN's mother answered a phone call, then suddenly widened her eyes and quickly unlocked the door. She told Midoriya she had an emergency meeting and asked him to come in, smiling as she hurried away while still speaking on the phone. Inside the house was quiet. YN's father was likely on duty again. Midoriya wondered where YN could be, then froze when he saw her sleeping on the living room couch. Their project lay on the floor, partly finished, confirming that she had worked on it ahead of time. Relieved, he closed the door and knelt beside her. Midoriya called softly to her, identifying himself and saying he was there, but she remained asleep. He watched her peaceful face and felt his cheeks warm at the sight, then shook the feeling away. He did not want to wake her harshly, and so he tried a gentle approach. He poked her cheek and brushed her hair lightly, then held her hand and gave it a reassuring squeeze. When none of that woke her, he gently caressed her cheek and considered waking her more firmly so they could finish the project. He paused, then decided to wake her with quiet affection rather than a startled jolt. YN murmured his name and opened her eyes. The first thing she saw was Midoriya, flustered and with reddened cheeks. Midoriya greeted her shyly and apologized for waking her, relieved to find her awake. YN rubbed her eyes, returned his greeting with a gentle gesture, and then sat up and stretched. She realized with surprise that Midoriya was already inside her house and had been trying to wake her. She apologized and hugged him, explaining she had not expected to nap so long. She checked her phone and felt bad seeing several missed calls from him. YN apologized again, saying she must have let him wait outside, and began to explain. Midoriya reassured her and returned her hug, soothing her back and insisting it was all right. He said he had only waited about 15 minutes and that he was just glad nothing bad had happened. YN buried her face in his chest and listened as he repeated that he truly meant it, smiling and saying he was happy they were both safe. He suggested they work on their project together, and they prepared to do so. I stopped fixing my bag when I heard my freckled boyfriend calling me from the east side of the classroom. He waved with his usual cute smile and was already wearing his yellow backpack. He ran toward me, and one of our classmates giggled at the moment. Boku clicked his tongue, Kirishima supported Midoriya with a smile, and Hagakure was fangirling with Ishido and Aoyama. I smiled and greeted him, then resumed putting my things into my backpack. Midoriya stammered and admitted that he was wondering if they could go somewhere together before heading home, explaining that they had both been busy for a week. I told him that sounded lovely but that I had an errand to run first, something I needed to buy. Midoriya looked sad for a second, then brightened with determination and grabbed both of my hands. He offered to help or accompany me and bowed, making it clear he only meant it if I was okay with it. I found him so eager that I could not say no, and since I wanted to spend time alone with him too, I agreed and gave him a quick embrace. He became flustered and laughed before hugging me back, then led the way. Later they arrived at the mall, a short trip with good bargains and quality. Midoriya watched as I browsed the lipstick section and remarked that I was buying makeup. I explained that it was only a lipstick because my old one had broken in half. He nodded and continued to watch as I examined the shades. I picked a pastel pink and mumbled that it looked cute. Midoriya appeared behind me, cheeks reddening, and asked if he might try putting it on me. He seemed shy but earnest. He bowed and scratched the back of his neck, explaining that he had never put makeup on his girlfriend before and wanted to know what it felt like. I smiled at the suggestion and kissed his cheek, telling him it sounded cute. I handed him the lipstick and explained how to open the cap, twist it slowly, color the shape of my lips, and brush gently so it would not be too much. He nodded rapidly, cheeks even brighter, and carefully opened the cap and twisted the lipstick out. He cupped my cheeks and apologized in advance in a soft, flustered way, calling me his angel and asking me to sit still. I smiled and reassured him that it was okay and that I knew he would not mess up. He said that hearing me say that made him more motivated, giggled, and promised to do his best. Midoriya exhaled and gently brushed the pastel pink over my lips. The motion was smooth, a little hesitant at first, but steady. He complimented me, saying I looked adorable with that color. I looked at my reflection and thought he had done a great job for his first try. He hugged me from behind, kissed the side of my face, and whispered that I was still beautiful without the lipstick. He even winked, which surprised me. The flustered childhood friend I had known since I moved had just winked at me. My heart raced and my cheeks warmed. When our eyes met in the mirror, his expression shifted from affectionate to embarrassed. He buried his face under my neck and mumbled repeatedly that he was a bit embarrassed and hoped he had not made me uncomfortable while holding me. Christmas had arrived. The streets were full of people buying gifts, and crowded malls with their big discounts reminded YN of nearly getting lost there with middle school friends. The chaos felt worth it, like training to become stronger, and then YN returned to the present. YN's mother emerged from the kitchen with a tray of freshly baked Christmas cookies made for Midoriya and his mother. YN finished adjusting a Christmas sweater, smiled, and took the cookies. YN's mother teased about being excited to see Izuku, which made YN blush. YN gave both parents a quick, affectionate kiss. The father was still adjusting the decorations on the wall. YN knocked gently on Midoriya's apartment door and waited. Midoriya Izuku answered, freckled and wearing a Christmas sweater. He greeted YN warmly and hugged her. He accepted the cookies with a grateful smile and offered a gentle, affectionate peck on the cheek. He thanked her and then, a little shy and blushing, asked if she wanted to spend time together. YN agreed and his eyes lit up. Midoriya went inside briefly to give the cookies to his mother. He told his mother he would take YN out on a Christmas date, and his mother reminded him to give the cookies to YN's family. He promised he would after the date and exchanged quick, loving words with his mother. YN listened and found the exchange sweet. She noted that Midoriya's father was abroad. When Midoriya returned, he was beaming. He told her that his mother said hello and, taking YN's hand, called her his angel as they left together. Later that afternoon they walked through town covered in fresh snow. They stopped at a cafe to try a warm hot chocolate topped with a detailed drawing of All Might. They sat and talked about the day and plans for the coming year, taking pictures with the hot chocolate art because it was their first time seeing it. YN suggested they drink before it got cold, and Midoriya agreed, eager to enjoy the treat with her. Afterward they wandered through the marketplace. With the evening approaching and fewer people around, Midoriya suggested going to the park to build a snowman and make snow angels, just like old times. YN teased if it was a Frozen reference. Midoriya laughed and said he simply wanted to spend that time with her. He reached out and pressed a gentle peck to her cheek, then said how much he enjoyed doing things like this together. They arrived at the park just before sunset, where it seemed as if the space belonged only to them. Midoriya stammered a shy wish that it might be. He led the way, searching for the perfect spot, and they found an open field blanketed in thick snow that felt perfect for their plans. Midoriya smiled excitedly and pointed out how much snow there was. He began to speak to YN, but was interrupted when she threw a snowball at him and laughed like a child. She apologized playfully, but Midoriya retaliated with 2 snowballs in an instant, and they both ended up laughing. She declared it a start of a challenge, and when he hit the back of her neck with a snowball she accepted the challenge with a grin. Thus, their snowball fight began. Throw after throw, the playful competition felt like childhood all over again. They shared laughs and dodged each other's attempts until, after about 15 minutes, both fell into the snow at the same time when they threw. Simultaneously, the impact left them breathless with laughter. She rolled onto her back and made a snow angel, commenting that it had been a while since they had done that. Midoriya laughed as he lay beside her and turned his head to watch her. Noticing her smile, he smiled back and crawled closer. He told her he was glad to spend the holidays together and then, after a hesitant pause and a soft request to proceed, he leaned in and they shared a gentle, affectionate kiss. He cupped her face as they held the moment. He told her she looked like an angel and promised to protect and love her always. She returned the sentiment, kissed the top of his nose, and told him she loved him. He laughed softly, kissed her once more, and they stood up from the snow. Midoriya reached into his pocket and produced a neatly wrapped gift for her. She opened it to find a plush toy made in his likeness. She touched it with surprise and delight. Midoriya blushed and explained that he had asked someone with a quirk that could make plush toys to craft it, knowing how much she loved cute things. She hugged him tightly, tears of happiness welling in her eyes, and thanked him. She apologized for not having her own gift with her, saying it was back at her place. He silenced her with a kiss and gently brushed away her tears. Midoriya showed her a message confirming that they would be going to her place for dinner, since both their mothers had been invited. He assured her she could give him her gift when they arrived. She reacted with surprise and amusement at her mother's preparations, and they both laughed together. He wrapped his arms around her and hugged her close, wishing her a Merry Christmas and calling her his angel. Later, the narrator finished dressing in a kimono with her mother's help and applied a bit of makeup. Her mother complimented her appearance and said that Izuku would love it. She checked herself in the mirror, and her mother sprayed a light scent on her before they left the room. Downstairs, her father greeted her warmly with a kiss on the cheek and told her to have fun and be careful. She promised she would and opened the door for her freckled boyfriend. Midoriya blushed and reacted with enthusiastic, shy compliments when he saw her in the kimono. She returned his greeting and told him he looked handsome in his black kimono. A sudden flash of light startled them both as a photo was taken. Her mother had snapped a picture, delighted by how adorable they looked together. Embarrassed but amused, she laughed and then said goodbye to her parents as they left. Time passed, and they carried their warm, cheerful mood into the new year. While they were walking to the shrine hand in hand, Midoriya stumbled over his words now and then, still distracted by how she looked in a kimono for the new year. He admitted that he had always wanted to see her like this on a date and mentioned, with a shy smile, that she reminded him of a delicate flower, like her mother had said. He kept complimenting her, which made her feel bashful and happy. When they reached the shrine, Midoriya bit his lip and apologized, saying they should have come earlier because of the crowd. She reassured him that it was fine and gave him a quick peck on the cheek, then suggested they go with the flow of people. Midoriya slipped an arm around her waist to keep her close so they would not get separated. She nudged him playfully, which made him flush and giggle, and he encouraged her to hold on as he guided them through the throng. Thanks to their careful coordination, they finally reached the offering box as the person before them finished praying. They dropped a coin into the box, rang the bell, clapped, and spent a few quiet moments in prayer. Afterward they stepped aside to let the next person have their turn. Midoriya helped her down the stone steps and asked if her prayer was the same as her Christmas wish. She nodded and admitted that was all she had been thinking about. He told her his prayer matched his Christmas wish as well, then suggested they explore the festival stalls and the wishing plaques. She pointed out the plaques first, and they walked to the wooden plaque area, which was surprisingly less crowded. She admired the different designs and excitedly picked up a particularly cute plaque. Midoriya agreed it was adorable and, with a shy laugh, compared it to her in a way that made her smile. She teased him gently and he blushed. They discovered an All Might-themed plaque that made Midoriya's eyes light up, and they both chose one. After grabbing markers, they thought for a moment and each wrote a message on their plaque. When they finished, they hung their plaques with the others and decided to read each other's messages before getting a snack. Midoriya asked to see her message, curious about a small doodle at the end. She returned the favor and they read each other's plaques at the same time. Midoriya stepped closer, cupped her face, and they shared a brief, tender kiss. He then smiled, kissed the top of her head, hugged her close, and whispered that he loved her. Her plaque expressed a hopeful wish for the year ahead and a desire to create more happy memories with family, friends, Class 1A and her boyfriend, with a small bunny doodle and hearts. Midoriya's plaque expressed a hope for a more peaceful year and his determination to become a great hero like All Might, so he could protect citizens, family, friends, and his kind and wonderful girlfriend, accompanied by a tiny All Might doodle. I stopped doing squats and panted before I let myself lie on the cushioned floor mat. I inhaled and exhaled, then rolled over to reach my phone on the table. I checked the box to mark that I had finished my set of 50 squats and told myself I needed to do another 50 to reach 100. The phone rang loudly and vibrated in my hand. I nearly gasped. I laughed at myself for being startled and saw that it was Izuku calling. I pressed the answer button and held the speaker to my ear. Izuku asked if I was busy. I hesitated for a moment because of the workout I had planned, but I also wanted to spend time with my boyfriend. I told him I was exercising. Izuku got excited and apologized for interrupting, explaining that the timing was perfect. He then asked if I wanted to work out with him at the beach, mentioning that he trained there and liked jogging in the afternoon. He suggested that we could take a stroll or swim afterward to relax and have fun, and he asked what I thought about the idea. I brightened at the suggestion and agreed enthusiastically. Izuku celebrated and called it another date, a fitness date, and laughed at his own joke. After Izuku picked me up and we traveled together, we arrived at Dagoba Municipal Beach Park. I remembered how he had once told me that his quirk had come through his connection with All Might. The memory felt recent and familiar. Izuku stretched and noted that there were only a few people around. I stretched as well and placed our bags on the steps of the veranda near the shore. I told him that coming here had been a great idea since I had not been to the beach in a while. Izuku suggested that we could jog here together after school sometime when he was in the mood for training. I agreed, pleased by his determination. When I tied my hair into a ponytail and asked what our first routine should be, Izuku nodded and encouraged me to start with basic stretches to help ease the fatigue from my earlier workout. He urged me to join him, and I followed his lead. We spent 2 hours exercising at the beach. It felt wonderful to work out with my freckled boyfriend. I even tried one of his routines, though nothing too heavy. We jogged along the shoreline and sometimes played tag for fun and to improve our speed and stamina. Afterward we panted and lay on the sand together, holding hands for a while. Izuku commented that the session had been productive and said that working out together had been great. He thought we should do it more often. I agreed and laughed. I sat up to look at the sea. Izuku sat up as well, looked at the shoreline and then at me, and suggested that we swim to relax and have fun. I smiled and nodded, then went to the veranda to get my one-piece swimsuit from my bag. I started to say I would change when I noticed that Izuku had already changed into his swim trunks. I stopped talking for a moment. A short neutral pause bridged the moment. She said she was fine, laughing to herself, then scolded herself for overreacting. He tilted his head with confusion, and she wondered if he was shy or simply didn't mind because it was her. Midoriya explained that she had never seen him like this before and laughed shyly, adding that he had worked hard during his training to get into UA and that his efforts had led to the person he had become. He stepped closer and embraced her briefly. Midoriya went on to say that he had trained to protect everyone, including her, and to show that he could be strong for her. Everyone knew Midoriya Izuku was an adorable yet determined person, and last week had revealed a new, clingy side of him that tugged at her heart. He had become like a teddy bear who wanted to be hugged, a new expression of affection for someone who was sometimes shy. 10 minutes before homeroom, she checked her watch. Midoriya had not arrived. He had texted that there was an emergency at his apartment and had told her to go ahead, but that message had been 15 minutes earlier. Ida greeted her and adjusted his glasses, asking where Midoriya was. She told him that Midoriya was not there yet and that she hoped everything at his place was okay. Kirishima arrived and laughed at her surprised reaction, then asked if Midoriya had an emergency. She nodded with a worried smile and said she would get a drink from the vending machine and be back. At the vending machine, Midoriya suddenly appeared, running toward her and panting, sweat on his forehead. He sat on a nearby bench by the water cooler and looked for a handkerchief. She took her favorite handkerchief from her backpack and offered it. She cupped his face gently and wiped his forehead. Midoriya thanked her, and she interrupted him with a laugh, saying it was fine and that, since he had run all the way there, she wanted to help as his girlfriend. Midoriya expressed his gratitude and hugged her warmly. She dabbed his forehead a few more times and returned the hug. She suggested they head back to the classroom together. He asked shyly if they could stay like that for a while. He explained that they had 7 minutes before homeroom and he had not walked to school with her earlier, so he wanted to hold on for a moment. She blushed, ruffled his hair, and agreed. He nodded and snuggled against her. Before Midnight's class, Midnight announced she would be late, so everyone had some free time as long as they did not cause trouble or skip when she returned. A message from Kendo alerted her to an urgent matter, and she decided to leave the classroom. Azui asked where she was heading, and she explained that Kendo needed something urgent for the girls. Ashido began to speak and was cut off mid-sentence by a surprised interruption. I placed a finger on my lips and pointed at the boys in our class. The pink-haired girl laughed and apologized, and Mina joined in with a playful croak. They kept chatting as I gathered my pouch with the thing inside and left the classroom to meet Kendo at the track field. I had a feeling their class might be held there with Aizawa today. More misadventures outside the classroom. Then, as I walked toward the track, I saw a bespectacled boy from another class trip on his shoelace and drop his books. My instinct to help kicked in, the same instinct Midoriya always had. I hurried over, offered to help, and smiled. The boy nodded and smiled back gratefully as I helped him gather his books and straighten his glasses. He looked closer at me and lit up, clearly surprised to recognize me. He told me he had seen me at the sports festival and admitted he was a fan. I felt awkward at the attention and explained I had somewhere to be. He introduced himself as Ken, thanked me again with a quick hug, and went on his way. I muttered to myself about never expecting fans at UA when Midoriya appeared, having finished his conversation with All Might. I greeted him with my nickname and asked if he was done. He smiled and said that All Might had offered to train him again at the beach park and that I was welcome to join since I already knew his secret. I happily accepted and grabbed both of his hands. Midoriya squeezed my hands in return and then pulled me into a brief hug. I surprised myself by smiling and returning the embrace. He apologized for overhearing my interaction with Ken and mentioned that the boy had said I had fans. I admitted I had been surprised by the claim. Midoriya reminded me that I had been popular back in 2nd grade, and he suggested Ken might be right. I laughed and said I doubted a horde of admirers would appear at school. Midoriya hesitated, then leaned his forehead against mine and confessed that he did not want other guys to take me away. I smiled at his jealousy. I reassured him that no one could steal me and told him he was better and cuter than any of them. He blushed and smiled. He asked, shyly, if we could share another comforting moment. Since we were alone and he seemed earnest, I hugged him again, and we stayed close for a short, quiet moment. He blushed deeply and twirled a strand of my hair, apology slipping out in a stammer as he tried to regain his composure. We finished our brief respite and headed toward the track field together, ready for whatever the day would bring. Midoriya said that he just could not help himself and smiled shyly. He admitted that he did not know what had come over him, but he loved her so much that sometimes he wanted to show it through gestures, and then he trailed off. The narrator observed that he was a blushing, mumbling mess, which made him twice as endearing as usual. Midoriya decided to walk back with her so they could return to the classroom together after she gave Kendo the item she had promised, since it was Kendo's first day. As they prepared to leave, Midoriya kept holding her arm affectionately and smiling. The narrator wondered why he could be so cute in so many ways. The narrator later sat on the couch with Siro while waiting for Midoriya to arrive for the group study that Ida had suggested so they could all strategize for All Might's group assessment test the next day. Ida sighed that it had already been 15 minutes and wondered aloud what had happened to Midoriya. The narrator checked the conversation with Midoriya and found no recent messages. Siro remarked that they were practically neighbors and that Midoriya was probably nearby. At that moment the narrator's phone rang with a familiar ringtone, and the narrator felt her cheeks heat as Siro and Ida reacted to hearing her boyfriend's voice. Siro nudged her shoulder and said he was happy they were getting close, and Ida smilingly predicted a beautiful future for them, commenting on how much Midoriya cared. The narrator thanked them for the support and then looked at the incoming message from Midoriya, which read that he was sick. Siro spit out his drink and Ida raised his eyebrows. Ida asked who was sick. The narrator frowned and suggested they postpone the study session because Midoriya was ill. Siro accepted the change and reminded them that the assessment test was the following week, so there was no need to worry, and asked the narrator to tell Midoriya to get well soon. The narrator and Ida agreed, and they began clearing the coffee table of notebooks and pens. After seeing Siro and Ida off, the narrator decided to visit Midoriya to check on him. She knocked at his apartment and called for him. When a freckled voice answered with the nickname she used, the narrator pressed her ear to the door, surprised, and then the door opened abruptly. Midoriya stood wrapped in a blanket, his face flushed. Midoriya explained that his mother had stepped out to buy groceries and apologized for his appearance, mentioning he had felt ill since the previous night. The narrator asked how he was doing and expressed concern. Midoriya gave a weak smile and coughed. The narrator checked his forehead and found he had a fever, alarmed that he had gotten up. Midoriya said he had only gotten up because he felt thirsty. The narrator calmed herself and insisted she wanted to stay and help him rest and recover, saying she could not help worrying. Midoriya reacted in awe to her worry and smiled back. The narrator led Midoriya to his bedroom to tuck him in and then returned with a tray of homemade chicken soup and a warm glass of water. Midoriya brightened at the sight of the soup and adjusted his position to sit up. The narrator explained that she had heard his stomach calling and had made the soup, apologizing for using his kitchen since he had fallen asleep. Midoriya laughed and said he did not mind waiting and then coughed again. The narrator set the tray on his bedside table, carried the bowl, and offered him a spoonful. She asked if he minded her doing so, and he nodded despite his flushed cheeks. He sipped the soup gratefully and pronounced it delicious, asking if she had cooked the recipe before. The narrator nodded and said she had learned it from her mother. The two shared a quiet, caring moment as she tended to him. She thought that if it were not for her mother, she would never have learned to make the special chicken soup with its secret ingredient. Midoriya shyly pointed at the bowl and asked for more. YN smiled at his reaction and fed him another spoonful, which he accepted happily. YN explained that the secret ingredient was simply love, then wiped his lips with a tissue. She kissed one of his fingers gently to return the affection he had shown her. YN told him that her mother had always said cooking with love made food taste better and had taught her this when she and her father were first dating. Midoriya listened, smiled, and then coughed. YN handed him a glass of water to help. Midoriya reached for YN's hand, squeezed it, and said that he could feel the care she put into the soup. He added that he now understood why her cooking always tasted so special. A short time later, Midoriya's mother arrived with groceries and medicine. She thanked YN for looking after her son, handed over a syrup for fever, and expressed how glad she was that YN was there for him. YN smiled, hugged her, and went back into the bedroom. YN announced that it was medicine time. Midoriya laughed weakly and insisted he was a strong, brave soon-to-be pro-hero, but allowed YN to help. She sat beside him on the bed, measured the correct dose with a tablespoon, and presented it. Midoriya hesitated, swallowed the syrup in one go, and then sighed with relief when the taste passed. He said that he had done it and squeezed YN's hand, noting that all he had to do now was rest. YN checked the clock and said it might be best to let him rest, hoping he would feel better in the morning. When she stood and reached for her bag, Midoriya looked worried and asked if she could stay until he fell asleep. Unable to refuse, YN sat back down, held his hand, and squeezed gently. Midoriya settled under the covers, rested his head on the pillow, and thanked her warmly, saying he felt blessed to have her support and that he loved her. YN stayed with him until he drifted off. She wiped sweat from her hands and dusted off flour from her arms as she finished her homemade valentines. Chocolates for her freckled boyfriend. She had never made chocolate before and had to retry the recipe twice, but the last attempt was a complete success. She smiled at the little all-might doodle she had drawn on the confection and felt pleased with herself. Her phone rang across the dining room. She grabbed it from the table and answered, recognizing the cheerful voice immediately. Midoriya greeted her with a bright good morning, and she returned the greeting, laughing softly. When he mentioned the cooking, she almost spoiled her surprise but managed to say she had prepared a snack. Midoriya responded with encouragement about her cooking and quirk practice, then suggested visiting since it was Valentine's Day. She proposed a picnic date at 5 in the afternoon so they could watch the sunset together, and he eagerly agreed, clearly excited about their first Valentine's date. When she opened her front door later, Midoriya came running toward her, waving with a huge smile. He froze for a moment when he saw her red and white outfit and light makeup. His face flushed as he told her she looked beautiful. She smiled shyly and twirled gracefully with the help of her telekinesis quirk. She thanked him warmly and complimented his outfit, calling it endearing. He laughed and wrapped her in a gentle embrace, calling her adorable and nuzzling close in a shy, affectionate manner. They exchanged playful, flustered compliments and laughed together before heading to the beach park where they often trained. The beach was empty and the weather was perfect. Midoriya looked pleased to have the whole place to themselves and reached for her hand as they set up their picnic blanket. After they finished, they sat down together and enjoyed the refreshing breeze. Midoriya admitted, shyly, that seeing her made the moment even better, and she felt her heart flutter. When he asked if she had brought her masterpiece, she opened the picnic basket and revealed the homemade chocolates. The sky was already streaked with pink and orange as the sun began to set. Midoriya stared in amazement at the chocolates, clearly surprised and touched. She tied her hair with a red bow and presented the gift, saying she had made it that morning with all her care and that the ribbon tied in her hair was part of her Valentine offering. He was visibly moved, sniffing as he tried to hold back emotion and calling himself lucky to be receiving such a thoughtful gift. They shared a quiet, heartfelt moment together. Midoriya then put his hand over his chest to show how much the gesture meant to him and confessed that he loved her very much. his face full of shy happiness. Midoriya could not stop expressing how much he loved the surprise and how much he cared for YN. She found the moment one of the most cherished and satisfying of her life. YN responded that she loved him too and encouraged him to open the chocolates so she could see his reaction. Midoriya answered with a burst of excitement and opened the box. When he saw the chocolates, he gasped and embraced YN unexpectedly, clearly overwhelmed with joy. He pointed out the small All Might doodle on one piece and said he wanted them to share it because eating together would make it taste best. The two of them lingered in that warm, quiet happiness. A short while later, YN threw a pillow and rolled around on her bed, groaning in pain. She wondered aloud, half to herself, why the world felt so strange and heavy that morning. Her phone began to ring across the room. She reached for it groggily and saw Midoriya's name on the caller ID. Fighting through the discomfort, she answered and spoke in a weak voice. Midoriya immediately sounded worried and asked if she was okay. YN explained that she had stomach pains and reassured him that she did not have a fever. Midoriya repeatedly asked what had happened and offered to come over so he could be with her and hear the explanation in person. Time passed. When Midoriya arrived, YN gave him a brief explanation so he could understand, and he listened with concern and gentle attentiveness. YN hugged a pillow on the couch while Midoriya sipped a glass of water and asked how long the discomfort would last. YN explained that it varied for different people but that, for her, it typically lasted 5 to 7 days. Midoriya asked if she had rested. YN said she had slept for 2 hours after lunch but that the pain kept coming back when she woke. She admitted she felt a little grumpy upon waking, and Midoriya laughed softly and patted her head in a comforting manner, remembering a moment when others had tried to wake her during a sleepover. When another wave of pain hit, YN suggested she might need something to eat. Midoriya insisted on going out to buy something for both of them and hurried outside. He returned shortly with items meant to soothe her stomach and satisfy her sweet tooth. Midoriya confessed that he had wanted to cook for her but did not know how yet. He expressed a wish to be like Kachin, who could put together decent meals. YN reassured him that his effort was what mattered most and that she appreciated him going out to get food. Midoriya became visibly moved, wiped at his eyes, and hugged her back tightly while saying how much he cared. Midoriya opened one of the items he had bought and said that the convenience store had recommended a new product he thought YN might like. YN's eyes widened when she realized he had brought freshly warmed curry buns. She noted how cute they looked and how delicious they smelled. I urged them to eat so I could take my painkillers later. Midoriya nodded and carefully blew on the curry bun before handing it to me with a bright smile. He cheerfully offered the bun, addressing me warmly. I nodded and blew on it once more before taking a slow bite. The first taste made my eyes light up as if I had reached food heaven. I exclaimed that it was delicious, then flinched as the pain in my stomach returned. Midoriya looked concerned and asked if I was all right. I smiled and apologized, admitting the pain was returning and trying to laugh it off awkwardly. He frowned briefly but then smiled softly as he watched me eat the curry bun while he ate his own. He hesitated, blushed, and asked if he could massage my stomach. He explained that it was a strange request but he wanted to help me feel better. I agreed without hesitation. His eyes widened at my response and he beamed when he saw me smiling while finishing the bun. He took the hot compress that had been resting on my stomach and gently massaged the area with his right hand while still finishing his bun. He asked if the massage helped. I smiled, nodded repeatedly, and then kissed his cheek. I thanked him for the warm gesture and leaned my head against his shoulder, telling him he was my hero that day. He blushed at being called that and smiled cutely. He replied that I was welcome and tenderly kissed the top of my head. He suggested that after we finished eating and I took my painkillers, we should cuddle so the pain would bother me less. A short while later, my freckled boyfriend paused his notes and turned to me with a cute smile when I called his name. He waved and asked what I needed. I smiled, sat closer, and admitted I thought he looked busy, but he assured me he had just finished updating an entry. He showed me the pages he had been working on. He had been updating information about Kamui Woods and had noted a new move. He excitedly explained that Kamui Woods had demonstrated a cool move while rescuing a group of people, and he briefly fanboyed before blushing and chuckling at himself. Then he asked what I wanted to ask. I produced a box from my bag and showed it to him. He recognized it instantly as Pocky, and I explained I wanted to play a game my friend had introduced me to. He blushed and admitted that a friend had suggested the game to him after we started dating. He laughed at the silliness of it. I teased him about his friend, and he chuckled. Then he accepted a stick of matcha-flavored Pocky from the box. He said he remembered how to play and bit one end of the stick while I bit the other. We counted down together and began nibbling toward the center, blushing and feeling a little competitive as we both tried to get the larger piece. My heart raced when I managed to bite closer, and our lips met briefly in a quick, innocent peck before we each pulled back smiling. I celebrated quietly at getting the bigger piece. Midoriya, still red-faced and slightly pouty, asked if we could play again. Midoriya stammered that he wanted a rematch. She giggled and agreed, adding that whoever won this round would get to make a request. Midoriya hesitated for a moment, then nodded and took another piece from the box. He called her cupcake and smiled with a competitive spark. They both bit the ends of the stick. She asked if he was ready and he nodded. When they counted to 3 on their fingers, they began nibbling the stick bit by bit. One bite after another brought them closer to the middle, faces flushed with color. Now's my chance, she thought, but the thought was cut short when Midoriya managed to get the larger piece and they suddenly found themselves much closer than before, faces inches apart. Midoriya wrapped his arms around her shoulders briefly to steady her, bringing them even nearer. They let go immediately, both blushing, and Midoriya looked like a mess of embarrassment and pure happiness. Midoriya declared his victory with a shy chuckle and teasing pride. She smiled at him, unable to hold back a gentle, affectionate gesture, and rested her forehead against his. Midoriya laughed and hugged her close, saying that as the winner he wanted to give her a congratulatory hug. March 14th arrived. The campus was lively, and the male students were rushing about an hour before homeroom, anxious about White Day. Some of them wondered aloud whether anyone had managed to give their partner a gift yet. One admitted he had not and confessed that he was terrible at picking presents. Others tried to calm him, advising him to simply choose something the person would like and reminding him that a gift from the heart mattered more than its style. A few of the boys complained about not having girlfriends and teased each other about it. She watched the group chatter and felt a pang of sympathy for those who could not relate, hoping they would find someone someday. Kaminari, who had been standing with her, began to get emotional about the topic. Kirishima put a reassuring hand on his back and told him he would have someone someday. Kaminari sniffled and leaned on Kirishima's shoulder while Kirishima looked at her and smiled. Kirishima said that Midoriya was lucky to have her and asked if this would be her first White Day with him. She nodded and replied that she felt like the lucky one. Midoriya had been kind to her since childhood, and she loved him for it. Kirishima ruffled her hair and joked that if Midoriya had a set of Uno cards he would play the reverse card. He went on to say that Midoriya often mumbled about how fortunate he was to have her. Her phone began to vibrate in her bag. She saw that Midoriya was calling and answered while holding the phone to her ear. Midoriya sounded hurried and asked if she was at school. She said she had just arrived, and he asked a favor in a breathless voice. He explained that it was urgent but not an emergency and reassured her that no villains were involved. He asked if she could go to her locker. Curious, she agreed and asked if it was a prank. Midoriya laughed and denied it, saying he never pranked her and that it had been his mother who had played a prank on them when they were children. The memory came back clearly. When they were young, Boku had once approached her and claimed he needed help with homework. Though she found it suspicious, she agreed to look. Boku handed over his notebook, and as she opened it, a handcrafted paper grasshopper popped out. The others burst into laughter at her startled reaction. It had been a mischievous, harmless prank that became a fond, if embarrassing, childhood memory. The blonde boy laughed and grabbed her notebook before leaving the classroom to go to the restroom. She called him a meanie as he went out the door. Izuku Midoriya, looking worried, immediately asked if she was all right. His concern brought her warmth and comfort. She told him she was fine and that Katsuki had just played a prank. She would forget about it and suggested they get ice cream before heading home. Izuku frowned at the mention of Katsuki but agreed, cheering at the idea. Later, she checked her wristwatch and told Izuku that she would head there now since she had time while waiting. He answered briefly and then hung up in a way that left her blinking in confusion. She wondered what he had meant but smiled at the thought of seeing him when he arrived at UA. At her locker, the hallway was unusually empty. She thought perhaps other students arrived closer to homeroom. When she opened her locker, a thick card lay on top of her shoes. Her heart warmed and her cheeks flushed as she picked it up and realized who it might be from. She turned and found Izuku standing there with a small bouquet of white flowers and a box of heart-shaped marshmallows. He also had a white ribbon tied around his head. She covered her mouth in surprise. Izuku approached and greeted her warmly, explaining that it was White Day and that her Valentine's chocolate had been the best. He presented the flowers and the box of marshmallows and added that he had made the marshmallows himself. She felt her eyes go watery and thanked him, embracing him and wiping away the new tears. She expressed how surprised and happy she was. Izuku laughed softly and said he was glad. He had timed his arrival because students rarely came an hour early to class unless they wanted to be early. She opened the box and tried a marshmallow, savoring the flavor. She realized the marshmallow was filled with strawberry and chocolate and exclaimed how delicious it was. Izuku, cheeks flushed, admitted that his mother had taught him how to make them. She praised the texture and flavor with delight. Moved by her reaction, Izuku hugged her gently and told her how happy he was to hear that. He expressed his affection and promised to keep making her feel cared for. She smiled, comforted by his promise and the warmth of the moment. Izuku Midoriya regained consciousness on the floor after about 5 minutes and tried to recall what had happened, but nothing came to him. He scratched his head and realized his hands looked smaller. A memory of the student from the park flickered through his mind. Looking down, he saw that his whole body and his feet had shrunk, and his eyes widened in surprise. He forced himself to take deep breaths and tried to calm down, but worry crept in. Break time was underway and his girlfriend was waiting at lunch rush. He needed to contact her. The noise at the door of the boys' restroom made him rush back into a cubicle where he fumbled for his phone, thinking he had to call her right away. His girlfriend had been waiting patiently for her freckled boyfriend. 10 minutes passed and she tried not to worry, knowing Midoriya could be forgetful sometimes. When her phone rang, she checked the caller ID and answered. The voice on the other end sounded like a child, and she briefly wondered how anyone else could be using his phone. She considered that he might be dealing with an incident and the child might be a victim, but she steadied herself and asked if the caller happened to be with her freckled boyfriend. The caller identified himself as Izuku Midoriya and insisted that it really was him. He asked her to meet him outside the boys' restroom near lunch rush and sounded hurried, explaining that he did not want anyone else to see him in his current state. Then he ended the call. She stood and hurried down the corridor toward the boys' restroom. Around the corner she stopped when she saw a small boy wearing an oversized UA uniform that swallowed his frame. Recognition hit her immediately. As she approached, the boy brightened at the sight of her, ran toward her, and tripped on the long uniform. He winced and held his knee. She rushed forward, sat on the floor beside him, and checked that he was okay. He nodded and smiled, and then tried to give her a big hug. She embraced him back, touched by how much he reminded her of a younger version of himself. He assured her that he was fine and, with a shy tug on her sleeve, reminded her that they needed to see Teacher Aizawa after break so he would not be suspected of slacking off. She agreed and lifted him into her arms. He hugged her tightly and cheered, invoking their motto and urging them to go further beyond. They set off together toward the faculty, the small figure in her arms beaming with determination. Time had passed since I brought little Midoriya to the faculty to tell Aizawa what had happened. Aizawa had been shocked when he learned about Midoriya's sudden transformation, but he understood once Midoriya explained the story. Midoriya had encountered a student from another school who was pranking people in the streets by turning random passers-by into children. Midoriya had been able to stop the prankster, but the quirk had affected him as well while he was walking to UA. Aizawa excused Midoriya from hero activities for the rest of the day and suggested that this kind of transformation might last until the next day. He also advised me to let Midoriya stay at my place for the time being so his mother would not worry. For now, the whole class was excited. Class 1A couldn't stop fussing over Midoriya's child form. Todoroki appeared beside them and commented that it was surprising to see him so small. The girls gushed that he was adorable, and several classmates remarked that they were now the same height as Midoriya. Mineta made an awkward remark that Boku found off, and several others laughed at the sight of Midoriya's shortened stature. Midoriya laughed shyly and admitted that he never imagined he would end up like this. Ida adjusted his glasses and told Midoriya that it was good he could still attend class, but that he could not take part in hero-related activities. Midoriya sighed at the restriction but smiled and said that he would catch up in his usual determined way and threw a small punch into the air to show his spirit. Ida grinned and lifted Midoriya into his arms, calling out their motto with enthusiasm. Midoriya then told everyone that he wanted to spend time with me. Boku scoffed and questioned whether it would be strange for Midoriya to go on a date looking like that, but Midoriya responded firmly that being in child form did not stop him from spending time with me. Ida set him down and Midoriya ran toward me, took my hand in a small, eager grip, and tugged. Boku clicked his tongue, gave us one last annoyed look, and left the classroom with Kirishima and Kaminari for their group study. We made our way to the ice cream parlor we had planned to visit. I had bought a few clothes that would fit Midoriya temporarily. He said he would keep them even after he returned to normal, though he did not explain what he meant by future purposes. I made a note to ask him later. His face was bright and cheerful, and I could not help smiling at how full of sunlight he seemed. At the shop door, I opened it so Midoriya could go in first. We stood at the counter, and a male employee greeted us politely and asked what we wanted to order. I thanked him and ordered 2 of the Sunday specials. As we waited, Midoriya watched me with a mixed expression that suggested he felt a little uncomfortable. When the employee returned with our sundaes, he asked a casual question about whether I was already in a relationship. Midoriya immediately answered for me, declaring that I was taken. Midoriya explained, in his determined little voice, that my boyfriend was kind and caring, and that his dream was to become a hero so he could protect everyone, especially the person he cared about. I covered my mouth, surprised and touched by Midoriya's earnest outburst. The employee laughed awkwardly and said he understood, stepping back to give us space. YN bowed and looked for a seat where they could avoid seeing the male employee's face so Midoriya would be less jealous. After they found a spot, YN set the small tray with their order and was about to sit when Midoriya appeared at their side, staring with his green eyes and sounding nervous. YN asked if he was going to take his seat, smiling. Midoriya twiddled his thumbs, blushed, and asked shyly if she could give him a quick hug to feel better. YN blushed at his cuteness and, feeling the warmth of his request, stepped closer and hugged him warmly, giving him a gentle peck on the top of his head. Midoriya blushed at the surprise and jumped with happiness. Midoriya hugged YN's legs and told her he loved her. YN returned the sentiment, kissed the top of his head, and reminded him that they should eat before the sundae melted. Midoriya nodded and sat down, happily digging into his dessert. Midoriya confessed that he wished he could be back to normal already because he did not like others flirting with YN in front of him. YN reassured him that it would be over by tomorrow and suggested they go on a proper date on Sunday. Midoriya brightened and agreed enthusiastically, proposing they visit the beach after their workout. He clapped with excitement, and YN took a quick photo of him in his child form, clapping happily with the sundae in front of him. The next morning came with memories of the previous day. Midoriya had been transformed into a child, had their classmates fawning over him, been mocked by Boku as usual, enjoyed a small date, been mistaken for YN's brother by a flirtatious employee, and spent a wholesome sleepover at YN's place so his mother would not worry. His mother had consented to the sleepover and trusted YN. Midoriya had even texted that he would borrow some of YN's clothes to avoid being recognized in his child form. The sleepover felt different from their previous ones but was warm and fun. YN had insisted he sleep on her futon, and they both ended up sharing the bed to rest comfortably. On Sunday morning, YN groaned about forgetting to disable the alarm. As she reached to turn it off, another hand beat her to it and switched the alarm off, sending her heart racing with surprise. Midoriya greeted her good morning. YN felt the arms wrapped around her tighten and, when she turned, saw that Midoriya had returned to his normal age and was wearing the extra white shirt and sweatpants she had prepared. YN expressed how glad she was that he had returned to normal and confessed she would miss his child form because it had been so adorable. Midoriya blushed and laughed, asking if he was not already adorable at his current age. YN replied that he always would be her adorable but determined boyfriend. Midoriya gently caressed YN's face and they shared a warm, affectionate embrace. He asked to stay like that for 5 more minutes before they went to the beach park, saying being close to her made his heart feel warm. They lingered together for a few peaceful moments before getting ready to leave. Later, on a Friday that was supposed to be good for both of them because they planned an amusement park date after school to try the newest ride, things did not go as planned. Both of them overslept and had to rush to the train station together while holding hands. As the train they needed arrived, they ran, breathless, each encouraging the other to keep going. A nearby office worker called out that there was still space and urged them to squeeze in before the doors closed. Several passengers made room so YN and Midoriya could get on. They pushed through with the last of their energy as the doors started to close and the train began to move. Both sighed with relief at the same time, grateful they had made it and still had a few minutes before homeroom. I laughed along with my freckled boyfriend, Midoriya, and joked that the train should go faster. As the train picked up speed, the sway pushed us apart. Midoriya reassured me that he would wait until someone left the train and smiled to calm me. I nodded, smiled back, and decided to put on some music to pass the time. I pulled my phone from my bag and opened my music app, scrolling through playlists until I found something to listen to. A senior student from a different school approached and greeted me. He recognized me from the sports festival and introduced himself with an eager smile. I felt a flush of embarrassment at the attention but responded politely. He complimented my performance at the festival and praised my quirk and fighting techniques, and I laughed nervously. The student's friendly manner shifted into something more forward as he moved closer. He invaded my personal space and made an unwelcome comment, then reached for my arm when I tried to step away. I tried to tell him to let go, but he held on. Midoriya stepped between us and pushed the student's hand off against the train window. Midoriya told the student to let go of his girlfriend, his expression protective. The other student's eyes widened, and he released my arm with a begrudging remark about the sports festival injury. The train lurched to a stop, and the senior lost his balance and stumbled onto the floor. New passengers got on as others left. I thanked Midoriya for stepping in, and he asked me to be careful next time before gently kissing the top of my head. I giggled as the train moved again and realized Midoriya was still leaning close in the corner of the car. The closeness made me flustered, and I wondered if this was the same Kabuton gesture my friend had once described. Midoriya admitted shyly that he wanted to stay like that for the ride, worried other people might try to bother me again. I smiled widely at his tender reaction and told him I didn't mind. He confessed that he had seen other couples doing this and had always wanted to try it with me but had been too nervous. He leaned in and gave me a gentle kiss on the forehead, a shy, affectionate gesture that made my cheeks heat. Midoriya explained that he had taken the chance while I had been distracted because he had been too flustered to try before. He rested his head against mine and suggested they save more for later, hinting that he might stay close again if I was comfortable. I laughed softly and felt my heart pound at how much more confident he had become since we started dating. I wondered if friends like Kaminari or Kirishima had given him tips to make our relationship more playful. Midoriya blushed and promised to take things at my pace as we settled into the rhythm of the moving train. Midoriya said it had been a great jog as Sunday finally arrived after a hectic week, and YN remembered that they had just finished their early afternoon run. They had meant to stick to the beach park where they usually exercised, but they had continued past the beach until they reached their neighborhood. They had probably overdone it, but fortunately they still had enough stamina to stop by Midoriya's apartment and rest. Midoriya remarked that the run had been longer than he had expected. YN laughed and sat down on his couch, saying that she had really needed the outing and thanking him for inviting her. Midoriya responded enthusiastically but was noticeably tired, admitting that his stamina had been worn down by jogging all the way there. He walked with a tired gait and sat beside her. After a few minutes, he leaned his head against hers. Pine gasped slightly at the contact and noted how tired he looked, though he still appeared endearing. Midoriya pantingly asked if he might rest his head on her lap, stumbling over his words as he explained that he wanted to know what it felt like now that they were a couple. He rambled in his typical earnest way, which made She reassured him that it was fine and gave him a quick kiss on the cheek, telling him he looked like he needed to rest. Midoriya smiled with a blush and settled his head on her lap, adjusting until he was comfortable. He wrapped his arms around her waist and held her gently. Wyan felt her cheeks warm but was happy at the sight of her freckled, green-haired boyfriend cuddling her. Midoriya commented that it was warm and that he could see why couples did this sort of thing. Out of instinct, Wyan stroked Midoriya's hair, then pulled her hand back briefly to apologize. Midoriya encouraged her to continue, saying that it felt really good when she touched his hair. She relaxed and began combing and ruffling his hair with her fingertips. She noticed how fluffy it felt, thinking she had never touched his hair like this before. Midoriya murmured that it felt nice and that he was feeling sleepy, mentioning that he had worked out earlier in his room. When Wyan reacted with surprise, Midoriya nodded and spoke about his dream of becoming a strong hero and his willingness to do whatever it took to protect everyone, including her. He reached out to slide her cheek and pressed a gentle kiss to the top of her hand, telling her that he loved her and asking her not to leave his side. Wyan told him that she loved him too and continued stroking his hair. After exchanging those sweet words, Midoriya fell into a deep sleep. Wyan laughed softly as she watched him sleep peacefully on her lap and adjusted some strands away from his face so he would remain comfortable. Stroking his hair felt pleasant, and an idea came to her. She quietly took a spare hair tie from her pocket, brushed a few strands, and tied a small ponytail before securing it with a bobby pin. She smiled at how adorable he looked and tried not to wake him. He yawned and realized she had dozed off a little as well. She felt movement on her lap and noticed Midoriya slowly waking. He opened his eyes, saw her face, and smiled before leaning in to hug her again. He sat up and stretched, feeling something in his hair. When he discovered the ponytail, he laughed and asked if she had done it. Wyan smiled innocently and pretended not to be involved. Midoriya called her silly and wrapped his arms around her, pressing gentle, affectionate kisses to her cheek. Wyan laughed and said that it tickled. Wyan laughed and apologized for teasing about how fluffy Midoriya's hair looked. Midoriya blushed, smiled, and gently touched her tied hair, remarking that it felt strange to have it that way. Wyan nodded happily and complimented him, stammering that he looked really cute, like a baby in a good way. Midoriya blinked a few times and returned her shy smile. Then Midoriya moved closer and they sat side by side on the couch. Wyan felt her heart race at his sudden boldness. This was another step beyond his earlier attempts at flirting. She thought back to their first flirty moments and the playful cabin on the train, surprised at how quickly things were changing between them. Midoriya, still bashful, wrapped his arms around her in a gentle hug and asked for more affection and attention. A quiet, tender moment followed. Months had passed since Midoriya confessed after the sports festival, and they had become more than friends, sharing their lives and keeping each other close. What Wyan found most endearing about their relationship was how easily Midoriya could become jealous over the smallest things aside of him she found unexpectedly cute. During a free PRD, Wyan noticed Hagakure, Ashido, and Azui crowded at a desk watching a video on Hagakure's phone. Ashido waved when she saw Wyan approach and urged her to look. Wyan recognized the performers on the screen and admitted that she used to be a fan and still listened to their music. Hagakure bounced with excitement at the revelation and asked who Wyan's favorite was. Azui and Ashido chimed in about their own favorites, giggling and pointing out details of the performance. The four of them filled the classroom with lively chatter, and several classmates watched as the girls danced along for fun. Midoriya watched Wyan dance with interest, but his expression was quieter than usual, and she wondered what was on his mind. After school, the two of them left UA together, hand in hand under an orange sky. Wyan forwarded the idol update to Hagakure, thinking her friend would love it. Midoriya hesitated, blushing, before speaking up. He admitted that it had been a while since he had seen Wyan fangirl over an idol group and then asked a question that made them stop walking and meet each other's eyes. He asked whether, when she first became a fan, she had ever had a crush on any of the members. And thought for a moment and recalled having had a crush back in middle school but nothing recent. Midoriya looked relieved and laughed nervously, dismissing it as nothing important. Midoriya interrupted with a nervous laugh and explained that he was just curious. I raised a brow, remembering his earlier expression and the way he had been responding to me, and the pieces clicked into place. My lips curled into a smile and I embraced my freckled boyfriend. Midoriya asked why I was hugging him, adding that he loved my embraces but wondered why now. I giggled, cupped his face, and told him there was no need to be jealous. I pressed a gentle, affectionate kiss to his cheek and hugged him again, assuring him that I cared for him alone and that being a fan of other people did not change that. He gasped slightly, admitting that he had been jealous since the afternoon. He apologized with a shy laugh, and I told him it had only shown a little. His cheeks brightened, and he wrapped his strong arms around me once more. Midoriya said he loved me and that hearing it from me made him very happy. It was lunchtime. I was watching an Animal Crossing video that Hagakure had sent me while waiting for Midoriya to arrive. We had decided not to eat in the usual cafeteria that day because Midoriya and I wanted to try the rooftop again. We had done it a few times before, and it felt like a good idea to do it again. A video Hagakure had sent played on my phone, a heterochromatic cat singing and dancing. I thought the game was adorable and smiled, thinking about saving up for it. Midoriya appeared running toward me with his bento box and sat beside me, explaining that someone had needed help and he had assisted right away. I told him I was glad he had been able to help people. He blushed, laughed, and gave me a warm kiss on the cheek. He noticed the video and asked if it was the new Animal Crossing game. I explained that Hagakure had been sending a lot of videos and that I had gotten hooked, then set my phone on the table with the case kickstand and pointed out a new feature everyone seemed to love. He laughed and teased that it was no wonder I had been busy watching the videos, and I agreed, squealing that the character was too cute. We opened our bento boxes and continued watching the videos Hagakure had sent, one after another. The next video showed a different set of characters singing the same song. I made a little fangirl moment over the yellow squirrel character and said I had gotten him in my new Leaf game. Midoriya laughed and agreed that the character was cute. I compared the character to a fluffy marshmallow and joked that the name suited him perfectly. I continued adoring the character while Midoriya watched me react with a small pout. He was happy to see me smiling, but he also found himself feeling unexpectedly affected when I fawned over a video game character. Midoriya called my name and hugged my arm. I nearly spat out my water from surprise but managed to swallow it. He apologized and kissed my cheek again, admitting that he had gotten needy all of a sudden. I told him it was okay and laughed, then asked what he wanted to say. He fumbled, twiddling his thumbs and blushing, and then asked if I found the character cuter than him. He stammered at having said it aloud. I smiled, gave him a quick kiss on the cheek, and reassured him that nothing beat him for cuteness. I told him not to be jealous of a video game character, since they were just cute animals. He smiled shyly, embraced me, and gave a brief affectionate kiss. He said that while he was working toward becoming the best hero and building his strength to protect others, he would always be my loving boyfriend. Later, a knock sounded at the door. I stopped browsing my phone and went to answer it. My next-door neighbor, Ms. Nakamura, the kind old lady I had befriended when I moved into the neighborhood, stood there holding a Shiba Inu puppy. I greeted her politely and paused, surprised and delighted by the puppy. Nakamura giggled and asked if she could ask a favor. The narrator nodded, and Nakamura explained that she would be heading to the market for ingredients and that no one would be available to look after her puppy Haru because her grandson was away on a business trip. The narrator asked if Nakamura wanted them to take care of Haru and smiled. Nakamura returned the smile and confirmed the request, then handed Haru over and pressed a bag of supplies into the narrator's hands. The bag contained dog food, a brush, and a small bone toy. Nakamura said she would be back by 5 and thanked the narrator, certain that Haru would enjoy the company. The narrator waved and told her to be careful on her way out. Once Nakamura left, the narrator was left alone with the fluffy puppy. The narrator greeted Haru and nuzzled the puppy, who barked happily, wagged his tail, and stuck his tongue out. The narrator rubbed his head and invited him to play, when someone knocked at the door. It was Midoriya Izuku. Midoriya pointed at the Shiba Inu and the narrator explained that it was Ms. Nakamura's puppy, Haru, and that Nakamura had asked the narrator to look after him while she shopped. Midoriya noted that Haru was a smart puppy and asked if it was all right that he stayed to hang out. The narrator agreed and suggested they take care of Haru together. Haru barked and wagged his tail at Midoriya, who petted him on the head. 2 to 3 hours passed pleasantly as Midoriya and the narrator played with Haru. During snack time they ate treats prepared in the kitchen while Haru ate his dog food. They tried teaching Haru tricks and were surprised to find he already knew sit, roll over, and jump. Having Haru around felt heartwarming. The narrator admitted it had been a while since they had played with a dog. Haru began to playfully bark and roll on the floor to get the narrator's attention. The narrator picked him up, asked if he had had a good nap, and hugged him close, nuzzling his tiny head. Haru responded with happy barks and tongue-out expressions. The narrator snuggled him and called him adorable. Midoriya then spoke up and the narrator felt his arms wrap around their waist. Both of their cheeks flushed. Midoriya mentioned that he had wanted some attention too and pouted that the narrator had been giving Haru a lot of cuddles. The narrator smiled and moved to face Midoriya, giving him a quick peck on the cheek and a little one on the top of his nose. Midoriya admitted with a laugh that he was a little jealous and asked if he could cuddle. The narrator laughed, hugged him back, and kissed his forehead. Midoriya suggested they stay like that for 10 minutes before playing with Haru again, and the narrator agreed. They cuddled while watching Haru play with a toy ball happily. After a short, cozy pause, they planned to return their attention to Haru and continue enjoying the afternoon together. YN stopped brushing her hair when her phone rang. It was unusual for her to get a call at night, so she reached for the device on her bedside table. The caller ID showed Midoriya, and she smiled as she answered. Midoriya's voice trembled as he asked if he could sleep at her place that night, explaining that his mother had given permission and that he needed to stay with her. YN agreed, and he hung up while still sounding anxious. A knock at the door later signaled his arrival. YN opened the door to find Midoriya drenched, holding a blanket and an umbrella. He closed the umbrella and hugged her tightly. He immediately apologized for an awkward affectionate gesture and seemed mortified, explaining that he had intended something else and felt embarrassed. YN felt her cheeks warm but accepted the hug without complaint. YN noticed something unusual under the blanket, animal ears. Midoriya, blushing, explained that this was why he had come to stay for a while. He removed the blanket to reveal dog ears and a wagging tail. He confirmed that he had been hit by a prankster's animal quirk on his way back from the convenience store. His ears flopped and twitched as he spoke. He shook himself like a wet dog, splattering water. He apologized profusely for making a mess and tried to grab a towel from his bag, but YN reassured him that it was fine and that she would get towels. She moved to help him and offered a comforting squeeze to steady him. Midoriya fumbled and then let out an embarrassed woof, surprised by the sound. He laughed nervously and admitted that it was a new reaction for him. YN found him unbearably cute and instinctively hugged him, holding him close in a gentle, comforting way. They stepped inside. Midoriya described what had happened. A prankster's quirk had inflicted the animal traits, and according to someone who had seen the transformation happen, the effect should last about 24 to 28 hours. YN reassured him that it did not seem critical and that they would get through it. She rubbed his head. His ears perked and then relaxed under her hand. When YN asked if his mother knew, Midoriya shook his head and explained that he preferred not to worry her. YN understood and offered him a place to stay for the weekend so he could be comfortable and recover without stress. Midoriya brightened at the suggestion and hugged her back, tail wagging in excitement. He blushed and admitted how much he cared for her. YN smiled and gave a gentle, reassuring forehead touch. Midoriya sighed with relief and said that the head rub felt soothing, like what dogs enjoyed. YN laughed softly and said she understood. She fetched towels and softly dried his hair, careful with the damp fur. Midoriya thanked her and offered, in return, to help dry her hair as well. The two settled in quietly, relieved to be together and ready to face the unexpected change as a team. I felt a little guilty for shaking all the water off my body in front of him. I nodded with a smile and continued to dry his hair. He kept looking at me with a blush on his cheeks and his tongue poking out like a happy dog. Midoriya laughed shyly and said that dogs did that when they were happy. I laughed with him and hugged him close again, teasing that he was so cute. My time with Midoriya Inu plus Midoriya, a nickname for our cinnamon roll, had only just begun, and I was excited for whatever would come next. It was only 1.5 days, but I wanted to savor every moment because I knew chances like this were rare. The next morning, my alarm went off and I groaned at having forgotten to disable it. Midoriya and I had stayed up late the night before, but it had been worth it. Before sleeping, my freckled boyfriend's dog instincts had been acting up and we had spent the evening playing ball. It had been adorable to watch him roll on the floor after catching the ball with his mouth. He had been shy about it, but he couldn't help himself in that form. I turned off the alarm, stretched, and wondered how Midoriya was doing. My thoughts stopped when I saw him still hugging me in his sleep, a little of his tongue peeking out. He was even cuter asleep than awake, and I pulled out my phone for a quick photo before putting it away. He woke slowly and a smile spread across his face. Midoriya greeted me cheerfully and made a playful woof. He then blushed and wiped at his nose when he realized how close he had been, and he laughed nervously, saying that it would take him some time to get used to everything. He added that he wanted to spend more time together since we had both been busy at UA, and I agreed, pulling him into another affectionate embrace that made his tail wag. Since my parents were still away for work, I would be in charge of cooking that day. Later in the afternoon, as I browsed the kitchen, Midoriya suddenly jumped to my side and gave me a big hug. He apologized playfully for jumping on me and explained that his animal instincts made him energetic. He said that while I had been napping earlier, he had felt the urge to run around the backyard and had even chased a cat up a tree. He had dashed after it like a dog, but the cat had already come down and disappeared. He had made a little growl at himself, embarrassed by his own behavior. I teased him about chasing a cat, and he admitted sheepishly that the experience had been intense. His energy and stamina felt higher, and his senses were sharper. I interrupted with a playful comment about his increased cuteness, which made him blush and laugh. He worried briefly about whether I would still find him cute once he returned to normal, rambling about how this form was just another version of him. I silenced him with a warm, affectionate touch and reassured him that he would always be my heroic and cute boyfriend. An idea had popped into my head, something I'd wanted to try even though I didn't have a pet dog. I gently rubbed his belly, and true to form his tongue lolled and his tail wagged happily. Midoriya laughed and admitted that it tickled but felt nice. I smiled and continued, teasing him about being a good boy. He protested playfully, laughing as I kept going, and then I got a bit clumsy and ended up falling on top of him. I worried and asked if he was okay. He laughed and told me not to worry. To be honest, the narrator thought they were getting used to it by now. Midoriya blushed, bit his lip, and reached out to gently caress the narrator's cheek. He asked to stay close, and they shared a quiet, affectionate moment before settling together on the couch. He wrapped his arms around the narrator's waist to draw them nearer, and the narrator felt their heart melt at his sudden, tender affection. After a while they pulled apart, smiled at one another, and laughed. They spent the next few hours cuddling while the narrator massaged his head and his tail wagged happily. By 8:25 p.m., his dog-like form had returned to normal. The narrator found it funny this was the first time a quirk had lasted only until evening instead of the next day, but they admitted they would miss the cuddly version, especially the way he barked and enjoyed the forehead rubs. Midoriya ran a hand through his fluffy hair and said he had to head back home because they had school the next day and teacher Aizawa had arranged a paired exercise, so he needed to rest. He surprised the narrator by using the new nickname they had given him and even barked at the end of the word as a playful habit. He laughed and admitted that the nickname was already sticking with him. The narrator smiled, hugged him tightly, and kissed the side of his face was removed and replaced with a brief, neutral moment of closeness. They wished each other well, and Midoriya left with a promise to be careful on his way home. On a different morning, they completed their third round of squats at the local beach park and collapsed onto the warm sand, laughing together. Midoriya offered to fetch water and a towel. The narrator used telekinesis to bring their bottle and towel close without getting up, then drank. Midoriya watched, fascinated, clapping like an excited child, and praised the narrator's quirk. He wiped his face with his towel, struck an all-might pose with an affectionate grin, and said he wanted to take the narrator on a date because he had missed them. The narrator smiled and returned the warmth of his words. Midoriya scooted closer and attempted to show affection, but the NTMT moment was brief and non-explicit. They both laughed when a sudden, playful wave splashed over them and drenched their clothes, forcing them to break the moment and scramble back toward the shore. She wiped her face, laughing that the unexpected splash had caught them off guard and left their towels soaked. Midoriya wiped his face as well, and before either of them could say anything, someone called from a distance. A humanoid seal in a rescue uniform waved from a nearby boat, and his companion peeked out behind him. The narrator recognized the sea rescue hero Selkie and his sidekick Sirius. Sirius explained that their captain had lost control of the boat and apologized for the interruption. Selkie added that their engines had malfunctioned and apologized for getting them drenched, then offered towels. Both of them blushed when Selkie teased them by calling them lovebirds. Sirius went below to fetch towels but returned empty-handed when she discovered they were all in the laundry. Midoriya quickly bowed and explained that they had extra clothes and thanked the crew for the offer. Selkie laughed and promised to make it up to them if they met again, noting that their schedule was tight, and then he guided his crew to change course and sail away. After the boat left, the narrator noticed Midoriya staring away, cheeks bright red and biting his lip. She asked if he was all right. He stammered, attempting to reassure her, then hurried to his bag and came back with an extra shirt to offer. He gave her the shirt without meeting her eyes, covering part of his face with his hand. He said he would dry his own shirt and excused himself to wash up, using a towel to hide his face as he headed toward the bathroom stalls. The narrator watched him go, puzzled by his sudden flustered behavior. In the bathroom, Midoriya steadied himself at the mirror after washing his face. He had been startled and embarrassed after seeing the narrator in a white shirt that had become soaked. The sight had left him unexpectedly flustered. He scolded himself inwardly for getting so distracted by the moment and tried to calm his racing thoughts. After splashing water on his face again to clear his head, he took a breath and prepared to rejoin her. The classroom exploded into confetti and party poppers the moment I stepped inside. Uraraka and Tsu floated nearby, showering me with glittering pieces while Kaminari, Kirishima, Siro, and Sato held a banner that read Happy Birthday, YN, with tiny balloons on each side. Everyone wished me a happy birthday and clapped with bright smiles. They had all been acting strange since morning to prepare this. I smiled widely, surprised my birthday had felt like it would be an ordinary day, but Class 1A had made a special surprise for me. They had even written birthday messages on a sheet of bond paper with Happy Birthday, YN, lettered at the top. Ida patted my head and offered a formal wish for a splendid celebration. Sato announced that he had baked a cake and suggested we all eat it during lunch rush before heading home. Ashido presented a wrapped gift, and Hagakure protested jokingly when Ashido reached it first. Jiraiya handed me what looked like earphones, and Yayarosa bowed and expressed hopes that I would stay healthy and happy. Their kindness made my eyes sting, and I bowed back to show my thanks. I thanked everyone, my voice catching as I admitted I had not expected this and was very grateful. The room erupted in applause, and Kirishima and the other boys cheered as if I had just defeated a villain. Midoriya was not in the classroom. When my phone vibrated, his message said rooftop, which made the others chuckle and Ashido squeal excitedly. Boku crossed his arms, told me to get moving, and, with reluctant warmth, wished me a happy birthday. Kirishima and Kaminari teased him about it, and Boku protested that they had known each other since they were children. I headed for the rooftop with a bubbling mix of curiosity and excitement. On the stairwell I found a note with my name in graceful cursive. The handwriting made me smile. It was clearly from Midoriya. I took the note and kept climbing. A little further up I found another note with a small bouquet of lilacs attached. The note mentioned that purple lilacs represented first love and recalled the memory of their confession. The scent of the flowers was sweet. I smiled again and continued to the rooftop. When I opened the rooftop doors, Midoriya stood there in his hero costume with a red ribbon tied around his head. He turned at the sound of the door and greeted me with a bright smile, holding green and my favorite colored balloons and a small gift bag. He ran forward, cheeks flushed with excitement, and wished me a happy birthday, apologizing that it might sound cheesy. He explained that he wanted to make my birthday special and had gone a little overboard, which made him awkward but earnest. I laughed at the sight of the costume and the ribbons and told him I was touched. He said, shyly, that he was one of my gifts and hoped I would cherish the day. They shared a brief, embarrassed moment together as they smiled at one another. Midoriya then presented his final gift. I opened the small bag and pulled out a cute phone charm with a chibi Midoriya figurine attached. I grinned and said I could not wait to use it, asking if he had it customized. He confirmed that he had. Midoriya told her that he remembered she wanted a custom phone charm because the designs looked cute, and he had chosen one just for her, smiling shyly. She giggled and gave Midoriya a big warm hug while holding the small bouquet of purple lilacs. She told him she was grateful and that she loved every second of what he had done for her. Midoriya replied cheerfully and then, a little nervously, leaned in and kissed her gently. He wrapped his arms around her waist and told her he loved her, saying that today was all about her and that he wished her all the happiness in the world. He promised to keep being her heroic and supportive boyfriend and encouraged her to talk to him if she was going through something. She chuckled and blushed at his adorable response. They shared a brief, tender moment together before stepping away to rejoin the others at the lunch rush cafeteria to celebrate with the cake. I had been standing at the station for 10 minutes waiting for my freckled boyfriend because we were going on a date. We had originally planned to walk together from home, but Midoriya had messaged to say he needed more time preparing and asked me to meet him at the station instead. I had assumed I was usually the one who took longer to get ready, so today felt different. I tapped my foot against the pavement, about to put in my earphones, when I heard a loud, cracking voice from a distance. When I turned, I saw Midoriya approaching, but something was off. His cheeks were flushed and his movements were clumsy and sluggish. I greeted him and waved, but he arrived by scooping me up bridal style and spinning me around in a slow, unsteady manner. He explained that he was late and had been preparing something, though he seemed to forget what it was and laughed nervously. He put her down, hugged her tightly, and told her he promised she would love it because he loved her. He snuggled close and pressed a kiss to her cheek. She told him she loved him too, but asked if he was all right because his behavior seemed unlike him. Their moment was cut short when a boy about their age ran toward them with another boy who looked exactly like him, clearly his twin. The first twin apologized and explained that his brother had used a hypnotic quirk on Midoriya by mistake. He said the effect, which made Midoriya act as if intoxicated, was meant for someone else and that a passerby had bumped into them, causing the mix-up. The twin who had caused the problem looked guilty and bowed, saying he was sorry and that he had intended the prank for a friend in front of the station. He added that he could not reverse the hypnotic effect immediately and that they would have to wait until the next day for it to wear off. I realized the way Midoriya was acting matched the symptoms of someone pretending to be drunk: unsteady movements, a cracked voice, slurred words, and gestures that didn't fit his usual behavior. He was even attempting to strike heroic poses and imitate All Might, but he kept failing. The apologetic twin introduced themselves by saying they were students from UA and that they were in Class C. He explained that his brother's behavior might remind people of a certain general studies student, but he emphasized they were sorry and would try to make it up to us. The nicer twin promised they would make it up to her and clasped his hands together before the pair of twins left. It was odd to see the nicer one dragging his mischievous brother away like that. She wondered why this was the first time she had seen them outside of school, but she shrugged the feeling off. When she turned back to Midoriya, he flopped into her lap and snuggled close. Midoriya, slurring and giggling like a child, urged her to continue their date and insisted the day was still young. She chuckled at his antics but felt unsure whether the date could go on given his unusual state. She told him that, as much as she wanted to continue, they should probably go back to her place and rest instead. He interrupted, clinging to her and suddenly tearing up. He pleaded to continue their date, stammering that he wanted to go to places with her and that it would be a waste to stop so soon. Worried by his tears and unable to refuse, she remembered that they were already at the train station and that he had made the effort to come by himself. With a sigh and a small smile, she hugged him and rubbed his back gently. She agreed to continue the date for a little while longer, asking him to stay close and warning him not to do anything rash in his current state. His expression brightened instantly. He returned her hug with clumsy affection and pressed a brief, grateful kiss to her cheek. Midoriya, still giggling, thanked her and promised to stick with her, declaring himself her hero. She smiled, returned the gesture with a kiss on his cheek, and told him he would always be her hero. They boarded the train together and set off, hoping the rest of the short date would go smoothly. The afternoon went surprisingly well despite the lingering effects of the strange quirk that made Midoriya act far from his usual self. He moved with sluggish, unsteady steps, stuttered and trailed off in his sentences, and babbled about unicorns and fairies while laughing in a way she found oddly endearing. He stayed by her side and did not wander off, though a few strangers gave them curious looks. She knew he would be mortified once he returned to normal. At the arcade, he giggled that he had had fun and proudly showed that he had managed to win a plush toy from a crane game as a gift for her. She found it odd she had never seen him win at one before, but sweet. She thanked him and kissed his cheek, then mentioned that they should stop by the supermarket before heading home because her mother had sent her to pick up a few things. Midoriya suddenly grew animated and pointed, shaking, at the large mirror outside the arcade. He mistook his reflection for another person and became distressed, worrying that a clone might take her away. She gently explained that it was only his reflection, that the light was bouncing back, and that there was no clone. He still fretted for a moment, tearful, saying that she was the only one for him and that he loved her. She wiped his tears away, hugged him close, and reassured him that she would always be his and that no clone could take her from him. She brushed his green hair, and he nodded, snuggling against her and repeating that he loved her. On the way home they stopped by the supermarket and she managed to buy the groceries her mother had requested. While she shopped, Midoriya found the broccoli amusing. He joked that the small stalks looked like him and, in his dreamy state, pretended they might be their future children. He even got a little emotional imagining a family with her, saying that he wanted to be with her forever and to build a beautiful family. His bold, heartfelt words were unlike his usual demeanor, and though she blushed, she felt happy hearing them. He asked if she would be his wife someday and expressed a sincere hope to be together always. She was taken aback for a moment, but she held the warmth of his words close as they continued their short, quiet date together. Midoriya asked nervously if they had returned as soon as they arrived at my place. I told him that, technically, he was at my place for a little while before I would take him back to his apartment, and I smiled as I rubbed his shoulder affectionately and offered him something to drink. He nodded and followed me inside. After I closed the door, Midoriya asked if my parents were home. I shook my head, explained that my father was working overtime on hero duties and my mother had gone to a gathering with friends. Midoriya worried about me being by myself, and I reassured him that I was fine and appreciated the concern. I added that I had a companion for the moment, so I was not alone. Midoriya brightened and hugged me, telling me he loved me. I hugged him back, and we shared a quiet, affectionate moment. He soon relaxed and fell asleep leaning against me, murmuring my name in his sleep. I smiled at how precious it was and decided to bring him back to his place later, planning to tell his mother that he had taken a nap at my apartment after our date. The next day, Midoriya was surprised to see me standing at his apartment door. He commented that I was the one fetching him this time and rubbed his temples. I cupped his cheek and asked if he was all right. He smiled, said he felt a bit lightheaded, and took my hand, urging me to come along. While walking toward the station, an awkward silence stretched between them until Midoriya spoke up, asking about what had happened the previous day. He remembered only fuzzy bits and wondered aloud if he had been affected by a hypnotic quirk that made him act intoxicated. I confirmed his memory, and he flushed with embarrassment. He fretted about whether he had done anything foolish during the date. I told him he had not been foolish and that we had continued the date because he had been very emotional and I did not want the day to go to waste. He turned redder at the thought of having cried in front of me and apologized profusely, embarrassed at being sentimental. I laughed and reassured him. I told him he had been especially cute and even joked earlier that he said I looked like a clone when he had pointed at my reflection in a mirror. He was surprised and tried to dismiss it, then suddenly remembered something more significant. He wrapped his arms around my waist and said he recalled telling me something important in the supermarket vegetable section, something tied to his deep feelings for me. My cheeks warmed at the memory. He reached for my hand and looked into my eyes, admitting that it might be too soon to say outright, but that in the near future he would definitely say those words I had guessed he had mentioned before. Today was the day of Midoriya Izuku's birthday. During lunch there had been a small surprise celebration at the lunch rush cafeteria. Classmates gave him presents, offered head pats and high fives, and Sato had baked a birthday cake so he could blow out the candles. When Lunch Rush learned about the arrangement, he added a special touch, a banana split with a cookie shaped like All Might. Midoriya was overwhelmed with gratitude and tears of joy. He thanked everyone repeatedly and said he had not had a warm surprise like this in years. After he finished packing his things in his yellow backpack, Midoriya noticed the narrator and asked what was happening. The narrator showed him a photo on a phone and invited him to the Mitama festival that night. Midoriya remembered seeing a poster in their apartment complex and asked if this was a date. The narrator admitted it was a birthday date just for the two of them and kissed his cheek lightly. Midoriya was moved and accepted eagerly, mentioning how he wanted to see the narrator in a summer kimono and to have their own lanterns at the festival. He wiped at the corners of his eyes and wrapped his arms around the narrator, pressing a gentle kiss to the top of their head before squeezing their hands. They agreed to go home together to get ready. Hours later, they met at the festival. The narrator found Midoriya lingering on a small wooden bridge. He ran toward them with an excited smile. He complimented the narrator's summer kimono and noted that their hairstyle was different from before. The narrator had planned the look to make his birthday extra special and posed. Midoriya blushed and said the narrator looked beautiful. He suggested they make the night memorable, took the narrator's hand, and hugged them, telling them he loved them. They walked toward the shrine and plaza, which were already decorated with 30,000 lit lanterns. People in summer kimonos took photos, watched dancers, and sampled street food from the stands. Midoriya's eyes sparkled at the sight, and he asked to see the lanterns first. The narrator had planned the same thing and they kissed each other on the cheek before heading to a display. They passed through a narrow walkway formed by lanterns and found themselves alone in that quiet spot. Midoriya murmured that the scene was beautiful and called the narrator beautiful as well. He blushed at his own words and apologized for being cheesy, but he insisted it was the truth and that the narrator was beautiful inside and out. The narrator welcomed the compliment and hugged him. They continued strolling hand in hand. The narrator decided to take a photo of the lanterns and once the shot was set, felt Midoriya's arms wrap around their waist. Midoriya asked if they could take a photo together, and the narrator agreed. She set the camera to selfie mode, prepared the selfie stick, and told Midoriya to get into position. Midoriya nodded and hugged her from behind, grinning as his cheeks flushed. She asked if he was ready and he answered that he was. She pressed the snapshot button and the countdown began. She wished him a happy birthday as the camera counted down. Midoriya began to respond with a laugh when he realized it was his birthday. He fell silent as she affectionately touched his cheek and they held their pose until the photo with the lanterns in the background was taken. They opened the picture and both chuckled at how cute it looked. She teased him about his blushing cheeks and playfully nudged him, and Midoriya laughed and responded shyly, suggesting something playful and then quickly becoming bashful before saying it could wait until later. They shared a quiet, tender moment, and Midoriya thanked her for inviting him. He said that he had never expected to spend his birthday like this with someone he cared about, that it usually involved just his mother and him, and that this evening made him feel very lucky. He hugged her and told her that being with her made the day complete and that he would never forget it. She returned his affection and used the pet name she had given him. An hour passed. They enjoyed the festival at the shrine together. They watched a dance performance, donated money at the offering box and prayed, joined in a lively group dance with the crowd, and ate savory octopus dumplings. Later they sat on a stone bench where they could see the lanterns and rested while chatting. When she checked her watch, her face brightened and she told him that she had something to show him. Midoriya looked surprised, then nodded and followed her as she took his hand and led him through the shrine paths. She brought him past the plaza of food and merchandise stalls to a quieter corner and asked him to wait for a moment while she ran off. He agreed, and she hurried to a nearby stall run by her cousin and her cousin's partner. Her cousin greeted her and asked if she was going to give him the surprise now. She confirmed that it was time, and her cousin and the partner prepared the items needed, covering the main surprise with a cloth. Her cousin asked a friend to watch the stall while they went to help, and the friend agreed. She returned to Midoriya, who was watching the night sky, and told him she was back. She produced a whistle and blew it once, calling her cousin and partner into position. Midoriya turned to look again and his eyes went wide as a dozen lanterns were released into the sky. The floating lanterns made the sky colorful and caught his attention and the attention of nearby onlookers. Using her telekinetic ability, she arranged the lanterns so they spelled out "Happy Birthday, Izuku." Midoriya stared in awe, tears welling at the sight, and admitted that he did not know how to respond. She then revealed what she had been hiding under the cloth. A lantern decorated with doodles of the two of them and a writing that said Izuku plus YN. She presented it with a proud smile. I lit the lantern and handed it to him, explaining that besides inviting him to the festival and showing the lanterns as a surprise, I had a present I made myself after my cousin taught me, and it had taken a week to finish. Midoriya leaned in and gave me a brief, gentle kiss. I stopped talking for a moment, then smiled and returned the gesture, cupping his face and resting my hand on his freckled cheek. Midoriya told me he loved the lantern and that the fact it had both of our names on it made him very happy. He giggled, praised how well it was crafted, and said he would hang it in his room and probably admire it often. I clasped my hands together in relief. Midoriya thanked me for making his birthday special and said he would cherish the memory for the rest of his life. Chapter end. YN hears a knock at the door and Midoriya asks to come in. Midoriya, her freckled boyfriend, stands in the doorway wearing a baby blue hoodie with the word blue written in Japanese characters. YN smiles when Midoriya speaks and invites him inside. Midoriya nods and returns the hug before pressing a gentle kiss to the side of her face and stepping into the room. He explains that he dropped by because the rain ruined their plans for a date, so he thought he might spend time with her at her house instead. YN laughs and says she had been thinking of spending time at his place next time. Midoriya chuckles and mentions that his mother is busy exercising with a neighbor. They laugh together, imagining Midoriya's mother dancing with a cheerful smile. YN notices the VR headset on the desk and says her uncle sent it as a gift today. She plans to test a game. YN connects the VR headset to the PC and calibrates the motion grips. Midoriya sits on the bed and admits he has never tried VR before, asking if this is her first time with this model. YN explains she had an older headset that broke and that she got motion sick at first but adjusted after a while. She puts the headset on and brightens when the game begins. The VR game sound is loud, and YN turns the volume down. Midoriya recognizes the game as Five Nights at Freddy's in its VR form and watches with wide eyes. YN says she wants to test her courage with the VR version and admits she is a little scared. She takes the two grip controllers and rolls her chair back so she can feel Midoriya nearby. Midoriya suggests that if she ever feels afraid she should tell him so he can comfort her. YN feels warmed by his support and tells him she will. She chooses the first night in the game to be safe. YN remembers how the original games frightened her, especially one that had made her fall from her chair before. She sighs and focuses as the game begins. A recorded message plays, offering reassurances about the first night on the job, and YN mutes it since she already knows the spiel. Midoriya asks whether she really wants to mute the message, and YN replies that she would rather listen to his voice. Midoriya blushes and says he enjoys hearing her voice too. The VR version animates the characters more fully than the older games, and suddenly an animatronic named Bunny starts moving. YN reacts with surprise as the animatronic approaches the player. Midoriya expresses concern, and YN tells him she has it under control. The tension builds in quick, non-graphic, anime-style action as YN checks the cameras and prepares to handle the encounter. She reassured him that night one would be easy and closed the left door. When she turned on the light switch, the animatronic bunny appeared and both of their eyes widened, especially Midoriya's. Midoriya stammered a greeting and remarked on how massive Bunny looked in VR. She told the animatronic to go away and shoot it while checking the other cameras, complaining that it was wasting her power because she did not want to fail too early in the game. Midoriya chuckled at her response and watched her with a mix of anxiety and excitement. She pouted and reminded Bunny to leave, trying her best to conserve power. Midoriya also demanded that the animatronic leave his girlfriend alone, joining in to reassure her. She grinned at the support from her freckled boyfriend and felt less afraid. After switching the left light 3 times and checking the power, she noted they were at 39% and doing well. When Midoriya warned her about the yellow character, she looked right and saw Chika walking toward the right door, so she immediately closed it. She thanked Midoriya for the warning and explained she had been busy checking the other cameras because she feared Bunny might return. Midoriya teased that he would always save her because he was a hero and gently wrapped one of her arms to comfort her. She smiled in awe at Midoriya and then, when the in-game clock reached 6 in the morning, they both celebrated. She removed the VR headset and gave Midoriya a brief, affectionate peck on the cheek, leaving him flustered and blushing. She corrected his praise by saying they had done it together and credited him with saving her from Bunny. They both laughed and waited for the second night to load. Midoriya expressed gratitude at being included and asked if he could try playing. She was surprised by his request but curious to see him play the VR horror game, since it was their first time playing a horror title together. She remembered playing a horror game once with someone else as a dare when they were younger, but this was a new experience with Midoriya. She agreed to help him since he had never played Five Nights at Freddy's before and smiled brightly. He nodded nervously and took the VR headset from her. She started to reset the game to give him a fresh start, but Midoriya stopped her and squeezed her hand. He explained that this was a test of courage for him and he wanted to try night 2 of the first game. She hoped he would be okay and promised to guide him. She kissed his cheek before helping him put the headset on and asked him to tell her if it was too tight. Midoriya adjusted the headset and exclaimed at how immersive VR felt. He assured her the adjustment was fine and called her by her nickname with a shy smile. She giggled and patted his shoulders before turning back to the monitor. The game presented a wrapped white birthday present with a red ribbon as a prize. After night, they decided to open it, though Midoriya gulped at the possibility of a trap. He carefully opened the present and a plush version of Springtrap popped out, causing both of them to scream. Midoriya hugged her tightly, startled and wondering if the game was warning him about what was to come. She told him to stay on guard because night 2 tended to get more intense and soothed his back as the screen faded to black. He let go so he could experience the actual gameplay, now in VR, which was even more immersive for a first-time player. A recorded message from the game's phone guy congratulated him on making it to day 2 and advised him to check the cameras to ensure the characters were in their proper places. Midoriya replied to the recording by saying it was thanks to his wonderful girlfriend that he had made it this far. The phone guy warned that Freddy and his friends became more active as the week progressed and suggested peeking at the cameras while he spoke. He also advised checking the curtain in Pirate Cove from time to time because the character there became more active if the cameras were left off for long PRDs. Midoriya acknowledged the advice nervously, and she giggled as she watched him interact with the phone message and explore the cameras. She reminded him to check Pirate Cove occasionally but not too often, offering guidance as he prepared for the next night. The narrator laughed and said they would not want to leave the other cameras now. Midoriya laughed nervously and promised to do his best, swallowing as he checked the feeds. Izuku suddenly stammered that the right door, was the one to watch. He cried out that the bunny animatronic was there. Midoriya immediately closed the left door and exhaled before glancing at the monitors. He laughed with relief and called the narrator his angel, grateful for the help. The narrator blushed and hugged his arm. The narrator cheered him on, reminding him it was 4 a.m. and that he could do it. Midoriya thanked the narrator and, voice trembling, warned about Chika approaching. He closed the right door when Chika came into view and sighed in relief. The narrator praised his progress and teased that it was a good start for his first experience. Midoriya admitted he was scared but was determined to use the night to build courage. When Midoriya checked the right side camera again, Chika was still hanging outside. He grew tense and began to sweat as the power dipped to 35%. The narrator offered a calming hand and asked if he wanted a hug. Midoriya said softly that a hug would help. The narrator nodded and hugged her freckled boyfriend as he continued scanning the cameras. When he double-checked, Chika had already retreated. Midoriya checked the time and announced it was 5 a.m. The narrator encouraged him that he was close. He continued watching the feeds, and when he glanced at the Pirate Cove camera, the curtains were open. The narrator felt a rising dread as footsteps on the audio grew closer by the second. Midoriya shouted for the left door to be closed. They both screamed when Foxy, the pirate animatronic, burst out and gave them a massive jump scare. Midoriya grabbed the narrator tightly, nearly dislodging the VR headset. The game transitioned to the familiar game over screen, a brightly colored room with a small TV and a cupcake on top. Buttons offered the option to continue or return to the menu. Both were breathing hard, then laughed together at how frightening it had been. Midoriya admitted the jump scare left him shaken, his heart pounding, and the narrator recalled not having seen one in a long time. He described how real Foxy felt in the headset, how it seemed ready to strike. After a nervous chuckle, he put the headset back on. The narrator was surprised that he intended to continue. Midoriya nodded and then realized the headset was in the way. He took it off and they shared a warm, encouraging moment. He said he was beginning to enjoy the game bit by bit with the narrator beside him and asked the narrator to keep talking so his courage would not falter. Later, the narrator was sketching on a phone when Midoriya returned from the restroom. He called out cheerfully, and the narrator giggled and went back to the drawing. Midoriya came over and sat beside the narrator on the couch to look at the work, clearly interested and supportive. Midoriya noticed the drawing and grinned, saying he had not seen me draw in such a long time and calling me Wyan-chan. I laughed while erasing a mistake and told him it had been a while. I had been busy with hero training and my personal life. He said the same and then gasped when he realized what I had been drawing. It was him in the school uniform from the Netflix series The Umbrella Academy. He lit up at the sight and named the show excitedly. I playfully kissed his freckled cheek and explained that I had been imagining what he would look like in that uniform and had started drawing after binge-watching the series for 2 days after school. He admitted he was still catching up, saying he was on Season 1, Episode 7, while I said I was already into Season 2, episode. He blushed at the revelation and pleaded for no spoilers. I nodded, stretched, and Midoriya reached for the pen, inspecting it intently as if studying a pro hero's technique. He asked if he could try drawing on my phone, explaining he had never tried digital art and wanted to feel what it was like. I invited him to draw together to make it more fun. He brightened and agreed, nodding eagerly. I suggested something simple and cute so he could follow along, and he gladly deferred to me at first before cheerfully handing the pen back. An hour or two passed as we filled the phone with silly, charming doodles. There were quick sketches of All Might hero logos, classmates from Class 1A, and even doodled versions of each other. Midoriya said the practice was fun and that doing it with me made him feel determined to improve. He suggested creating a cute character, and I smiled and agreed. I hugged him when he blushed at his own compliment and told him he was cute. I rubbed his soft hair, then started a new canvas and sketched a plant person. When I handed the pen to Midoriya, he thought quietly for a moment and then began to draw. He used the same colors and brush and, to my surprise, drew a male version of my plant character. In his drawing, the two characters were together. His plant character placed a gentle peck on the cheek of my plant girl and held her hand. He explained that he had originally been thinking of giving the plant girl a friend, but then realized she needed someone more than a friend. That someone reminded him of me because I was cute and growing, so he gave her a partner who could grow alongside her. I blushed and told him I had never thought of that. I told him he was amazing. Midoriya returned the hug and wrapped his arms around my waist. He suggested that we be like the two plant samplings in our sketch. He then gave a brief, shy peck on my forehead and said he wanted both of us to continue to grow so our relationship could bloom. A peaceful Sunday followed. I thanked Izuku for taking me out. He had invited me to a newly opened park with a wide grass field where people could have picnics, and the day felt gentle and full of quiet warmth as we walked together. They had planned a picnic, and now they had just finished the sandwiches Izuku had made for both of them. Izuku blushed deeply and told YN not to worry, admitting that this was his first time putting so much effort into making food for his special someone and asking if she liked the design. YN laughed and told him he had done a great job, then gave him a gentle kiss on the cheek. Izuku scratched the back of his neck, thanked her for the praise, and rested his head lightly against her shoulder before taking out his phone and quietly musing about what to make next. YN suggested that they cook together another day, saying it would be extra fun to create something delicious as a team, and giggled about the idea. Their moment was interrupted by distant cries for help coming from the east side of the park, toward the market district. Izuku stood up at once and told YN they needed to check the situation and see how bad it was. YN nodded quickly, grabbed his hand, and helped him up from the picnic blanket. When they arrived at the market area, people were running and several police officers were already working to contain the trouble. A police officer ordered his men to stall the villains until the heroes arrived and to focus on defending the area while other officers evacuated citizens. The officers used their shields to hold back the attackers. Izuku and YN exchanged a look and then focused on the people in peril. Izuku put on a determined expression and said they had to help evacuate the crowd. He admitted that they had been planning to go to his place and relax, but he was ready to act now. YN told him that they could do that later and that she wanted to help and support him. More people were running past them, and YN noticed several teenagers with bruises among the crowd. She saw Izuku evacuating a nearby citizen. A child's panicked cry for her mother rose over the chaos, and YN felt her instincts push her to find whoever was calling. She sent a quick message to Izuku to let him know she was going to help find the child, then moved toward the sound. She found a small girl clutching a teddy bear and wearing a little bag. The girl sniffled and asked if YN had come to help. YN hugged the girl for comfort, took both of her hands, and promised that she would keep her safe. The girl nodded, and YN lifted her into her arms and began to run toward a safer area. Before she could move farther, a group of rough-looking villains blocked their path. They surrounded the pair like a menacing cloud, and one of them taunted them, calling them two girls. Another villain noted that one of them was a child and scoffed, making it clear he was aiming his attention elsewhere. YN felt a cold knot of fear but tried not to show it. She used her quirk to pull a police shield and several market boxes into the villains' faces to create an opening. The villains cursed at the sudden attack, and one of them commented on how tough her quirk seemed. YN whispered to the little girl to hold on tight and attempted to levitate the child to look for help, but one of the attackers recovered quickly and planted himself directly in front of them, continuing to taunt them and demand they give up. YN set the little girl down gently and grabbed a nearby object to defend herself. She thanked the child for staying brave and announced a change of plan, then scanned the area for an opening to lead the girl to safety and protect her until more help arrived. Someone nearby shouted that she needed to run now. She stammered in refusal. What does she mean by that, she wondered. A voice warned that it was dangerous and urged her to go somewhere safe. The speaker promised to look for her later. She refused. Her block had been a little loose, and a swift blow to her stomach sent her tumbling to the ground. She adjusted her footing, cursed under her breath, stood up and ran. Her priority was to get the girl to safety and find Izuku. One of the attackers who had been chased off earlier shouted for her to come back. Another man declared that they should just take the girl's money and leave. An argument erupted between them. After a brief quarrel, one of the men sprinted toward the frightened little girl. The child cried out for help. She sighed, deciding that rescuing the girl and escaping were her main priorities. She told the child not to worry and ran toward her. Before she could reach the girl, a villain laughed and announced that the girl would be coming with him, producing crackling electric sparks. She recognized the quirk as resembling Kaminari's and told herself to avoid the electricity while moving. Concentrating, she grabbed a large object nearby and used it as a makeshift shield to protect her back. She had to get there in time. She had to save the girl and reunite with Midoriya to make sure he was safe. When she reached the child, an electric spark grazed the side of her body. She felt the shock but managed not to fall. The villain increased the rate of his attacks, forcing her to push herself despite reduced stamina. After steadying her breath, she fought through the pain and used her telekinesis to lift the girl into the air. The little girl squealed in surprise and thanked her. She winced but managed a reply. The villains showed no sign of giving up just then, but Midoriya suddenly charged in with a fierce, protective energy. He immediately struck both attackers with precise, powerful blows, forcing them to stagger and recoil. He looked at her with an expression that mixed relief and something more complicated. At that moment, pro-heroes arrived as well. One of the pro-heroes instructed them to escape while the heroes handled the attackers. They all nodded and left the scene, reaching the evacuation point without further incident. At the evacuation area, the little girl spotted her mother and ran into her arms. She hugged the narrator's legs in gratitude and asked for an autograph if the narrator ever became a pro-hero. The narrator smiled, crouched down, hugged the child briefly, patted her head, and urged her to go to her mother. The child waved and was reunited with her mother in the crowd. Midoriya stood watching that quiet moment and smiled, but his emotions were conflicted. Then his expression changed. A serious, sharp tone came over him. He demanded to know why she had not called him. She explained that she had been cornered while trying to save the girl and that the villains had been on them. She told Midoriya that she had not called because she remembered his injuries and did not want him to risk himself during a villain attack. She said she could not bear to see him hurt or worse. Midoriya interrupted, his voice rising with urgency and fierce concern. He insisted that if she had called he would have come immediately and said he could not stand the thought of losing her. He declared that he would protect her even if it meant taking risks himself, and asked if she trusted him. After letting his feelings out, he huffed and glared, breathing hard. She widened her eyes at his intensity, feeling a sharp ache that mixed hurt and worry. Wyan wondered what was happening. Throughout her life she and Izuku had never fought or yelled at each other except when Boku was involved. Now, for the first time, they had something to argue about. Her eyes stung and she stepped back. Izuku's expression softened when he realized what he had done. He covered his mouth and his eyes began to water as he tried to apologize. She could not speak and fought back the tears, then told him that she had to go. She attempted to walk away from her freckled boyfriend, but he reached out and grabbed her arm, pleading that he did not mean it. Her voice cracked as she interrupted him, demanding to be left alone and saying that she wanted to be by herself. She freed her arm and ran without looking back so she could let her emotions settle and try to come to her senses. Izuku stood frozen, horrified at what had happened. He thought desperately that he was sorry and could not believe he had caused this. Tears came to his eyes, and he remained there trembling while passers-by glanced over with sympathetic expressions. It's been a few days since Midoriya and I fought, and neither of us had the courage to face the other the following morning, which happened to be a school day. We left our houses at the same time, heading toward the station, but the moment we saw each other the air grew awkward. We stood there, staring, each of us silently debating who would speak first or whether we should speak at all. Midoriya forced a morning greeting, smiling in a way that was not his usual, easy smile but one he was trying to put on to ease the tension between us. I wanted to return the smile, but I was still hurt. Him only a slight nod with a neutral expression and hurried past him toward the station because I suddenly felt like crying. Midoriya understood in that instant that my feelings were wounded from his sudden outburst. He and I had argued before, but never like this, and the fight had knocked both of us off balance as if we had been slammed in a match. Day after day, the awkwardness continued, and our classmates grew worried. Normally, Class 1A teased or cheered us on during breaks, but our big argument made everything stilted. The girls comforted me, telling me that fights were normal in a relationship, and the boys tried to cheer Midoriya up. Even Boku, who usually pretended not to care, showed concern by the third day. I could tell from his eyes, and then he admitted it outright. He told me that if Midoriya didn't make up with me and kept being a coward about it, he would go talk some sense into him for being a bad boyfriend. I protested that it was our fight to handle and that I was thinking of a way to make things right, but Boku exploded that he was worried about me. I gasped at his outburst. He softened after a long sigh and patted my head, saying he did not want to see me get hurt. I found it unexpected that Boku, of all people, was the most worried among our friends. 2 days passed and I still wanted to talk to Midoriya, I just did not know the right moment. I held back, afraid he might not be ready or might get angry again. The uncertainty made me anxious, but I missed his conversations, our shared laughter, training side by side, our hugs, and the gentle kisses we exchanged that always made my heart flutter and my cheeks warm. It had only been a few days, but I did not want this silence to continue. A light rain began to fall. I stopped walking when I felt raindrops on my uniform and opened my compact transparent umbrella to avoid getting soaked. As I reached for my bag, a folded piece of paper I had been hiding under the umbrella caught my eye. Curious, I pulled it out and read the note. The note told whoever read it that they meant so much to the writer, comparing them to a blooming flower whose presence, attitude, and smile brightened the writer's life. The writer said a flower like that should return to its garden and meet its matching bud, a bud that could not continue to bloom without its partner, someone desperate for company and forgiveness and who would always support and love them. The note concluded that the writer did not want to lose a flower like that. My cheeks warmed as I read. The handwriting felt familiar, and at the bottom of the note there was an address and a small hand-drawn map pointing to a local park. It was not the park I usually visited, but a larger park with a vast flower field that often hosted spring events and was a popular dating spot. The discovery felt strange and hopeful. Yan decided to check the park mentioned in the paper before going home. She arrived at the local green park and followed the map's directions. It was not far, and when she reached the field of flowers she paused to take in the view. Rain still fell lightly, keeping the flowers wet and sparing the caretakers some work. Yan wondered why spring had already passed months ago yet so many flowers still bloomed. She considered that perhaps the park owner had some unusual talent and then began to walk aimlessly through the field of small blossoms. She kept asking herself where the person who had left the note might be and what they could possibly want. She walked until something gentle tugged on her umbrella. Startled, she turned around and found Midoriya standing there, holding one side of the umbrella. Yan recognized him immediately. She asked quietly if he had been the one to write the note and slip it into her bag. Midoriya's expression shifted. He looked as if he might cry. He nodded and tightened his grip on the umbrella. He explained that he had written the note and assumed she would recognize his handwriting from his notes. Yan hesitated while searching for the right words, afraid that a single wrong phrase could make things more awkward. Midoriya stepped forward and apologized face to face. He said he regretted the day the marketplace was raided by villains and that he regretted yelling at her. He admitted his words had sounded like his mother for a few seconds, but that he had not intended to react that way. He explained that he had been worried and anxious, and that his own injuries and a recent terrible nightmare had made him overreact. Yan listened with a worried expression as Midoriya continued. He confessed that he had been thinking about the nightmare 2 days before their date and, seeing her fighting, had feared it might somehow foreshadow what could happen to her. He said he had yelled out of worry and anxiety, not because he thought she was weak. He asked for her forgiveness and offered to accept whatever consequence she chose, even if she needed space from him. Midoriya sobbed quietly while keeping his eyes on her. Yan felt her heart ache at the sight but also relief that he had come to address the issue. She reached out, cupped his face, and leaned in to press a brief, tender kiss to his lips. Midoriya's eyes widened at the contact but he returned the gesture and wrapped his arms around her waist, drawing her close. Yan giggled softly through her tears and forgave him, admitting that she had planned to talk to him that day but had been too hesitant. She said she missed him. Their embrace deepened into a gentle NTMT moment. Midoriya told her that he missed her too and promised to be more careful in how he responded when concerned for her safety. He said he hated the thought of losing her and that she would always be his angel and hero. He smoothed her wet hair, kissed the top of her head, and hugged her tightly. Midoriya whispered that he loved her and thanked her for forgiving him. Yan hugged him back and reassured him that she loved him as well, comforting him as his breathing steadied. When the rain stopped and the sky cleared, they let go of the hug and shared another sweet, tender kiss. They did not notice at first that the patch of flowers around them had formed an almost perfect heart shape. After they reconciled, Midoriya bought ice cream for the two of them and they enjoyed it together as they walked away from the park. Of course, the protagonist wanted to pay to be fair, but Midoriya insisted on treating them. Midoriya bit his lip and asked if he was a bad boyfriend after their fight. The protagonist shook their head and told him he was not a bad boyfriend and asked why he would think that. Midoriya laughed with obvious relief and kissed the top of the protagonist's head, then explained that Boku had commented about their fight. The protagonist thought of Boku and silently chided themselves for telling him not to bring it up. The next morning, the protagonist greeted Midoriya. Midoriya responded with surprise at the early visit, sounding shy but happy. He explained he had been looking for something and suggested the protagonist should have knocked so his mother would let them in. The protagonist waved it off and gently tapped his nose playfully. Midoriya blushed and asked why they had touched him. The protagonist teased that it was another way of showing affection. Midoriya laughed, returned the gesture, and hugged the protagonist before urging them to leave for the station so they would not miss their train. During a short break in class, midnight was called away by Principal Nizu, so the students lingered in the classroom waiting for the next subject. Half of the boys sat at their desks talking and browsing their phones, while Kirishima and Boku had an arm wrestling match with their classmates cheering. The girls occupied themselves quietly, Yaoyorozu reading and Ishido watching a dance video. The cheerful noise from the arm wrestling briefly drew the protagonist's attention, and while they watched the lively scene, Midoriya approached and tapped their nose again, smiling. The protagonist laughed and blushed. Midoriya said he was returning the favor from that morning and admitted that the protagonist's reaction had been cute. He took their hand and squeezed it gently. The protagonist smiled and tapped his nose once more, which made him chuckle and squeeze their hand back. Their moment was interrupted when Ida announced the arrival of their next teacher. Midoriya sighed softly, kissed the protagonist's cheek, and went back to his desk. After school, the two stopped at a convenience store to pick up ingredients requested by the protagonist's mother. They left the store holding hands as they walked home. Midoriya asked if the protagonist's mother was trying a new recipe she had seen on her favorite cooking channel. The protagonist explained that their mother wanted to try new dishes and suggested inviting Midoriya and his mother to dinner that evening. Midoriya grinned and nodded, agreeing that it was a good idea, and they continued home together. She had been about to say she would let her mother know when Midoriya suddenly booped her, and he looked caught off guard, his heart skipping a beat and his eyes blinking a few times. She teased that she had him now, and he returned the boop, prompting a playful exchange. He booped her back quickly, and she laughed that she was ready to boop him in return. He made a startled sound, then dodged and laughed playfully, challenging her to come and catch him. She accepted, and their boop goose chase began. They ran together through the neighborhood, both laughing, neither using their quirks. It had been a long time since Midoriya had been so playful. She remembered the last time they had chased each other like that was during training before entering UA. He tried to change direction, and she followed, wondering where he was going. After almost 5 minutes they ended up in the local green park, which was surprisingly empty except for a few street sweepers. As she picked up speed to catch him, she tripped on a rock and tumbled into Midoriya's arms. They rolled across the grass together and after a minute, stopped rolling and laughed at their silliness. She apologized and hugged him. He hugged her back and smiled that perhaps it was the calm breeze that had made him think of coming here. She asked if he could feel it while they were running, and he nodded. Caught up in the moment, she reached out and lightly booped his nose, giggling that she had finally gotten him. Midoriya laughed shyly and admitted that he should have booped her first. He confessed that being close to her made him feel peaceful. They held each other for a moment in quiet affection. A short time later their light-hearted moment ended and they separated, smiling and ready to continue their day. October 31st had arrived, and Halloween filled the neighborhood as children in spooky and cute costumes went trick-or-treating. She and Midoriya had planned a Halloween date based on a dare from a friend named Ishido. At first Midoriya had been hesitant, but he agreed because he thought it might help him be a little braver. They arrived at their destination, a cemetery. The dare required them to watch a horror movie there, and if they refused they would have to watch it in a haunted house instead. She thought the cemetery was preferable and led them to sit by a stone staircase. Midoriya admitted his worry about rain and fog, and she reassured him that the weather report had said no rain, though there might be thick fog. She reached for his hand and gave it an affectionate squeeze. Midoriya admitted that he was concerned about the fog and joked nervously about villains, then straightened and spoke with a determined expression reminiscent of All Might, promising that if she was in trouble he would save her. He grinned and called himself her hero. She returned the sentiment, calling him her hero as well, and then opened her laptop to start the movie. Midoriya wrapped one arm around her waist to pull her closer. He told himself quietly that this would not be as bad as the haunted house and that they could handle the dare together. She replied with their little motto, and she started the horror movie. They settled in to watch. 35 minutes into the film, the atmosphere outside added its own noises. Birds chirped and crickets rustled in a nearby tree, sending little chills through them, though they tried to distract themselves with comments about the movie. Midoriya showed occasional signs of fear but kept his expression composed. She did the same, and they traded light remarks to ease the tension. At one point she looked down and noticed the popcorn bag was empty, and she apologized for that. Midoriya apologized and admitted that he had eaten the last few pieces because he had been trying to steady his nerves by eating. She pressed a gentle forehead touch to him and held him in a warm hug to calm him down. She reassured him that it was okay and produced another bag of popcorn she had brought just in case. Midoriya sighed with relief, smiled, and watched as she opened the bag. Few pieces while watching the film, then offered the bag to Midoriya. Midoriya thanked her. A sudden jump in the movie made them both startle and nearly spill the popcorn they were sharing. Midoriya wiped his brow and commented that he had thought he was getting used to the scares after a few of them, but both of them noticed the atmosphere shifting around them. She shivered as the air grew colder and fog began rolling slowly around the gravestones. She wrapped her arms around herself and noted that it was getting foggy and colder. Midoriya immediately wrapped his arms around her and pulled her close to warm her up. He snuggled against her and asked if that was warm enough. She felt her heart lift at the kindness, nodded quickly, blushed, and thanked him. She gave him a quick, affectionate peck on the cheek and wrapped her arms around him in return, saying that all they needed was a warm drink like hot chocolate when someone suddenly shouted loudly right behind them. They jumped again when someone touched their shoulders and shouted to startle them. When they turned, they saw Ashido, Kaminari, and Aoyama in Halloween costumes. Ashido laughed and called the prank priceless. Kaminari laughed too and said it had been hilarious, adding that he wished he could share that kind of fun with his future girlfriend. Aoyama struck a fabulous pose and mentioned that he had made his costume with sparkles. Midoriya and she exchanged a look and sighed together, then smiled, impressed that the prank had been so well planned and executed.